14th.
Oh, well, it's coming up.
Yeah. It's coronavirus, good.
Yeah. My brother went to Florida. I dropped him off at the airport on Tuesday. He texted me, said he didn't see one person wearing a face mask.
There was a woman, I don't know which year, but she worked at an airport. And she has the coronavirus. And you know what her job was? Testing people.
Oh, jeez.
Talking about direct contact.
Yeah.
Like to call to order the City of Eastpointe Planning Commission meeting for Thursday, March 5th, 2020 at 7:02 PM. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Lalonde?
Present.
Mr. DeHunt?
Here.
Ms. Moore? Here. Mr. Broll?
Present.
Ms. Julinski here. Mr. Palazzolo?
Here.
Chairman Lubeck?
Here. Move on to the approval of the agenda, and the first thing that we need to change on the agenda is to remove unfinished business item B as requested by City Council. They have voted not to proceed with the Habitat for Humanity and Ford Container Project, and have also requested that we do not have any further discussion on the changing of the ordinance. So we will be removing that item.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we move unfinished business item C to after new business.
There's been a motion to move unfinished business item C until after new business. Do we have support?
I'll support it.
We have motion and support. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. DeHunt?
Yes.
Mr. Lalonde?
Yes.
Mr. Broll?
Yes.
Mr. Palazzolo?
Yes.
Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Julinski, yes.
Ready for her to finish calling the roll?
Oh, Chairman Lubeck.
Yes.
Oops.
At this time, we have our first hearing of the public. This is the opportunity for the public to speak. Since we don't have any other public hearings tonight, this will be the only time you get to address the Planning Commission prior to us taking action on any items. Some of you may have been here for the container home project. And like I said, that is no longer on the agenda. Council has voted not to proceed with that. So sorry to disappoint you if you were here to address that issue. Otherwise, this is your opportunity. And when you get to the podium, there should be a notepad up there. Please print your name on it so we can adequately reflect that in the record. Is there anyone that desires to be heard? Yes, sir.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Daniel Curris. I've been up here a few times. In my opinion, as commissioners of Eastpointe, I feel that there's a fiscal responsibility to all of its residents and business owners. I'm referring to the DDA and the zoning for the medical marijuana. I don't believe this has been discussed or researched at all. And I'm kind of curious if this leaves the city of Eastpointe a target for not doing what is fiscally correct for its residents or its business people. Of the 3 licenses that Eastpointe has, they can restrict any one of the 3 licenses to the DDA. Again, this is a restriction, not an allowance. So Eastpointe would have 3 licenses with 1 restricted to the DDA and the other 2 restricted to your designated area. The reason I'm saying this is if there is a license in the DDA and any taxes created above and beyond, the city can keep that money in its downtown development as TIF money, and it stays in the downtown area and doesn't have to be shared. By restricting 1 license to the DDA, I feel with all the surrounding businesses that it will create a blossom of money that Eastpointe, again, can keep in its DDA. And I ask that you consider that because of the large sums of money the city can keep in its downtown instead of having it go elsewhere. I want to thank you for listening to me.
Is there anyone else that wishes to be heard? Anyone else wishing to be heard? Seeing none, we will close the first hearing of the public and move to the approval of minutes, starting with the minutes for the February 6, 2020 meeting.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes of the February 6, 2020 regularly scheduled meeting.
Support.
We have motion and support. Any additions, deletions, corrections? Seeing none, Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. DeHunt?
Yes.
Ms. Julinski, yes. Mr. Broll?
Yes.
Mr. Lalonde?
Yes.
Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Palazzolo?
Abstain.
Chairman Lubeck?
Yes. Approval of minutes, item B, February 13th, 2020 special meeting.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes of the special meeting on February 13th, 2020.
Support.
We have motion and support. Any additions, deletions, corrections? Seeing none, Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. DeHunt?
Yes.
Mr. Palazzolo?
Yes.
Mr. Lalonde?
Yes.
Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Broll?
Yes.
Ms. Julinski, yes. Chairman Lubeck?
Yes. Brings us to unfinished business. Item A, Ms. Van Haren.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Michael Garza of All Points Auto Service is seeking site plan approval for 182039 Mile Road, Teppert's Golden Gate subdivision, lots 95 to 102, excluding the south 10 feet for the road, parcel combined on 9/8 of 2016. I might add that the City Council at their meeting this week on Tuesday did the first reading of the ordinance that would modify the parking requirements, and that's why we tabled this matter specifically. And if indeed a motion is to be made to recommend or to approve this, I would make it pending the second reading and the approval of the ordinance in its entirety.
Ms. Ha?
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. As you recall, this site plan was discussed last year and then tabled pending the text amendment to the zoning ordinance, but also pending some additional information from the applicant, which I believe has been provided at your seat this evening. I'll briefly go through those items and then proceed to our recommendation. So the first item that has been almost addressed is the parking of the non-public spaces, that dimensional standard, which is being addressed by the proposed text amendment. The second item was that it was requested that the applicant provide additional information on the office space and the number of employees on the largest shift. This information was provided, and the existing parking on the site is sufficient based on those numbers. Information about the loading activities was also requested. So in terms of business parts, the applicant will only be receiving those shipments Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. But then the shipment of vehicles at the property will be 24/7. So that could happen at any point. Also discussed was the landscaping and screening. And the applicant is requesting a waiver from the traditional 6-foot masonry wall that is required between this property and adjacent residential. The applicant is proposing a 6-foot synthetic wall. I believe that he has provided an image of what that would look like at your seat. It's a bit more of an industrial appearance to better match the building. And this is not pressure-treated wood, but a synthetic material that would follow the same construction and installation methods as a traditional masonry wall. The other landscaping item has to do with the number of required trees for the property. 11 trees are required, 3 of which are provided on the site, which leaves 8 trees outstanding. And the applicant has noted in their letter to the commission that payment in lieu of those would be acceptable as they cannot be provided on the site. And there should be a new landscape plan as well at your seat that is colored and shows the additional shrubbery that is provided on the property. With those items, we do recommend final site plan approval if the commission finds that the loading activities are acceptable, and then contingent on 4 items. So this would be approval of the alternative masonry wall. It would be contingent on the payment in lieu of the 8 trees to the city. It would be contingent that all engineering items are addressed. The engineering report is listed in your packet, dated January 29th, 2018. And those items would need to be addressed before occupancy or final permits could be issued. And then the 4th contingency would be the pending adoption of the recent parking tax amendment. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Ha?
I have a question on the alternate fencing.
Yes.
So what exactly are they proposing to replace the existing fence with alternate that runs along the alleyway?
I'm not sure if they're going to be replacing what's existing.
This place, again, was Olive Planning Commission. Again, thank you. My name is Mike Garza on behalf of All Points Auto. This, again, to remind you, was a tax foreclosure building property that was acquired in 2016, basically missing a roof. They had been there for over 65 years, and they were grandfathered into no wall. So we have to put up a wall. And this is the discussion that we had for about an hour and 45 minutes last year, at the end of last year. What I propose is I put on the last page there, 15, an image of what I think is more attractive than a concrete wall. You guys didn't want wood. I wasn't planning to put one of the traditional vertical wood fences, but I think that something like this is much more modern and it's very tasteful. It matches our building as well. Our building is tan with black trim. These are steel I-beams with synthetic boards running horizontally, stronger than any vinyl fence that you can buy. It's replaceable. If any of the panels get damaged or graffitied, you can slip those out and put new ones in easier than a concrete wall as well. Our neighbor behind our business as well came to our meeting last time. He was opposing the concrete wall. He's also here to answer any questions for you tonight. But I was thinking that this would look a lot more uniform. So you come into our property and everything looks pretty much the same as far as the appeal and the look of the whole place. It's the most attractive auto shop I can think of around. But it's very expensive for everything that this project, since the time I've taken over, I put sweat equity into the business. I fix all the cars. I take care of all the payments, all the buildings. So I'm a one-man band, pretty much trying to do all this to also better the city and better our future. So
I guess my question is, where does this fence that you're proposing run from where to where?
it's this was all discussed last month, but it runs approximately 10 feet from the edge of Roslyn. It's on page. You can look at page 8. The page 8 has the overall plan. This is also here. So the wall, according to the code, needs to start a distance from the edge of the property line, and it's going to basically run about 126.9 feet long all the way around the back of our property here. That's the proposed wall, but keep in mind that there is no driveway here at this house. So there's only street parking, and what I was proposing was leaving something open for them, or just not putting the wall, or maybe put some shrubs or something back there. The only bit of wall is literally behind the vet tech right here. There's a small piece of wall that's just at the end by them. The majority of the block is ours from the parking lot over, and there's nothing there now, and it's a rental home behind us, and there's nobody there either. But that house doesn't have a driveway, either the street or there, so in case the city ever did change the law of on-street or on-street parking, they would then have to figure that out. They don't have a driveway. So if they could have something where if all the utilities for their backyard is back there too, and they don't really have much room to get between the house and the new wall that's gonna go up there to even access that to dig up. I've seen them back there excavating a few different times for the pipes underground. But anyways, anything that could help me with the budget as well too, please.
I have a question. In looking at the diagram, it looks like the proposed wall is ending halfway into the proposed parking lot. Is there an existing screening device on the rest of that?
Our neighbor is with us. There's a double wide gate there for his property so he can enter the backyard.
So all right, so the area from where your proposed wall ends to where the parking lot ends, that's a double gate?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It's a feature of his home. In replacement of the trees, we've added a lot more curb appeal to the front of the property. Again, on page 8, there's a legend at the bottom that shows a variety of trees, variety of bushes, layering of shrubbery and ground cover ascending to the building face. There's about 60 juniper, 9 bluebeards, 23 euonymus, 4 hicksus. There's 2 I added some photos from Google of what these plants look like. The junipers will be the first on the list. And beyond that, there's some euonymus, some bluebeards, some hicksus. We've got some pretty century ginkgo trees. And I've got a couple western redbuds on proposal as well. So we're trying to make it pretty. We were told, don't put trees in front of windows, so we've replaced that concept with better shrubs. The building is quite close to 9 Mile. There's a lot of traffic, and in the wintertime, we get a lot of tidal waves that come over, and they basically hit the front of the building and the windows, and all that gets pretty wrecked anyways, so it's tough to keep that nice. We will do our best to keep it clean. We've done well so far.
Well, during this awkward pause, I'm going to give you a kudos because you have done a whole lot of work. So that's neither here nor there. But you know what I have to say? We see a lot of proposals put before us. Some I tend to wonder if they use a straight line, but I have to give you credit. You've got a great proposal here.
Thank you. It's very stressful, and we've been doing this since the end of 16. My life changed at the end of 16 when we won that auction, and we've been trying to keep up with the financial side of things the whole time, and I've been on time with all my payments to the city and taxes, and just trying my best to make it right for everyone.
Does anyone have any objections to the alternate screening?
None.
I do not.
I don't agree with it. I'm very consistent in any alleyway that abuts neighborhood houses. I can't vote in favor of it. We've been consistent with all of our other property owners unless there's a compelling reason. So sometimes when it's not a public alleyway and cars aren't driving through it, then I can concede. But this is a public alleyway. And as a matter of fact, we had a site plan that came in front of us a couple of years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, that was similar, right? Where it had a house that didn't have a driveway that you could get to from the street it was on. It was behind the Verizon Jay's Chicken Place. That fence, I drove past it today, and the fence looks like a car ran right through it. Now, that's the portion of the fence that was existing, but it speaks to the potential for a car to hit it and why we have these types of fences in our ordinance. So, with that said, I'm not in favor of an alternate fence here, but I understand you are, so.
I don't think it's a weak fence. I see synthetic vinyl fences all over the city. There's a big one right at the Family Dollar on 10 Mile. It's huge.
Well, the only thing I would say to that is
There's panels.
we have an ordinance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we are holding all the other companies that are business owners like yourself, we're holding them to that same standard.
Right.
So if we make an exception for you, now everybody that comes in front of us, we're gonna have to consider that as well. And I understand your point. I don't disagree. I'm just telling you the reasoning why I feel like I do.
Thank you. The also concept too, as well, is I was gonna potentially use that material for our wall around the properties for our parking lot. So the whole thing will look uniform too. So not just the wall behind it, but the wall around our fence.
This is
Around
an
our property.
interesting layout too, because the house, I guess it would be on the west side on the alley. You're right, it doesn't have a driveway. There may or may not be enough room that if there was a fence put up there that a driveway could go there. It would be tight if it does, but it can't happen anyways, because at the end of where the driveway would be is either a light post or it's a utility post. So you literally, even if a driveway would fit, it can't happen.
What I would propose is a parking pad behind the house, like the house. There's a house and neighbor over off of Teppert. If you go to Teppert over, you go behind their alley and you make a left into their driveway behind the house. So they could put a garage back there. They could put a driveway
Well,
parking
I
pad
think
back there.
your other neighbor to the east side has, an entrance right there with a gate. It'd be something similar to that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
The only way you can do
reality of what we face in Eastpointe sometimes, that some of these houses were built like this one that really can't have a driveway. So we have to deal with it.
The only way to get back there behind the house is either take our wall down or to take the house down if they have to get an excavator to get back in that backyard. That's the only
right.
That's the only thing I can say about it. You put a concrete wall up there, and you're gonna have to take it down to get something back. And I've already seen it happen twice.
Well,
There's a pile of dirt back there behind the house.
What I would say is my original thought process is to have something, a cement wall, the wall that it meets our ordinance, but also have a fence similar to what your neighbor on the east side has. Understanding we have to give that resident access to their house.
That's
their
fine.
backyard. That was my thought.
Mr. Chair, if I could just pipe in here for one moment. We do already have masonry wall in this alleyway, as you know, and so our ordinance says that we're to match that masonry wall that's already existing. For the sides, it's behind the animal hospital, so within that block, we already have some masonry wall. And that opening that they're proposing for that residential neighbor's driveway, they already have a driveway off of the side street. So this is like a second driveway off of the alley. Not really required, not something that we're required to provide, and to have, it's such a wide opening, it looks like it's 30 feet. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's 25 feet. Maybe that's in excess too, maybe we need more masonry wall there. If we're gonna allow an opening there at all, maybe it's more minimal than what it's shown on the site plan.
I think that is actually three, I want to say it's three, entrance gates.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but I believe it's three entrance gates.
Yeah.
And I know the neighbor's here, and he's,
And they're only entitled to an entrance off of the alley when they don't have the ability to have one off of their street. And they have one there already, so just to keep that
I
in
would just
mind.
ask for the commission to consider the cost of this, based on all the other expense that I've already had to go through for the recondition of the building. I understand that it was my responsibility to take care of it, but it's extremely expensive. And that's just, I'm asking just for some consideration for that, or some more time is all I need to put it all together. I've met every other requirement possibly asked of me, I think.
And the 3 trees, right? I mean, I don't mean that as a flippant comment, right? But I mean, you're 3 trees short, right? I mean, that's,
8 trees.
Eight trees.
oh, I'm sorry, 8 trees, no.
He
it's-
has
yeah.
3 trees.
It's 3 trees, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't even,
If you want to discuss that a little bit,
trees.
the street trees on Roslyn are where the utilities of the building are. So there's gas lines, power lines, water lines that all run underneath where the trees could go.
Yep.
There's really no room on that side of the building for trees to be there in ever. So that's another thing I can hope that you guys can consider. I understand that the code says that there's a required amount of trees, but there's physically no room for them on that side anyway. So that's part of the reason why we want to do that. The second reason on the other side is it's a security thing as well. You have trees with overhang on them. They block cameras. They allow people to get into our yards and break into cars. They block signs. And it's an established building that's been there over 65 years. Commercial zone.
Yeah.
I'll happily put trees somewhere else in the city if you guys want.
so anyone object to payment in lieu of?
Nope. No, I don't.
No. Is there anything else anybody wants to talk about besides the wall and the trees?
I do want to hear from the other neighbor.
My name is Bernie. I'm the neighbor on Teppert, directly behind the animal hospital. And I understand that I'm not, I guess, supposed to be able to have those gates, but I need them. And I would greatly suggest that I need at least one. I have a big truck for my work truck. It doesn't fit through my first gate off Teppert. It does not fit. I have a boat, I have trailers. None of that goes through that front driveway. It won't fit. Without me tearing down more fencing and then having to come to you and petition to change things that you've already told me in the past I can't change. Those gates are there, they work, they're great access for my backyard. I have a huge concrete pad back there for my boat, for my trailers, to get in and out of my backyard, to my garage. I'm a contractor. I need the space to pull my work truck back there to move around. Without that space, I can't. I'd be parking it out in the street, which I've already had my truck broken into out to the street. Everything goes in the backyard. It gets locked up behind the gates. It's a security thing for me. I have cameras back there watching everything. I can't put stuff out in the street, and I can't get my big truck through that front driveway. That's what it is. It won't work. I need those gates, at least one of them. So that's my piece. I also am for the proposed fencing that he wants, I think that concrete fence is, number one, ugly. It's deteriorating. It's extremely hard to keep clean, and it's making my front yard, where it is actually next to my pool, a lake. The drainage on it is horrible. I have already had to construction cordon off that whole area from my dogs because they come in going out white, they come in muddy. Like, they get a bath every time they go outside. Because of that wall, the drainage right there creates a lake, and that wall would not do that. It has access under it so that drains both ways. That concrete wall there, it doesn't drain out the other side. It just pools right there by the utility pole in my yard. So, A, it would match everything that he's doing and it would look uniform. And B, it would be better for the space as far as drainage and cheaper for him so that he's not breaking the bank to try and do this to code and possibly, you know, being in fear of going out of business and then the building being empty again.
It's a grass line right there too that the fence ends on, so everything beyond that is concrete. So if you continue that wall, you're now tapping into concrete. So if you start where I have the wall starting, that's from the grass line all the way down to the other end of the street.
Mary?
Commissioners, I would say that I'm in favor of keeping at least two of the fences, two of the gates. I have no issue. I have no issue with three. You know, they exist. Their access to this backyard, it's completely cemented by that gate area. So I have no problem with three. He said he wants at least one. So, you know, between 1 and 3, I'm fine. What does everybody else think?
Keep 3, I'm game for 3. I love 3.
There's no reason to adjust it. It's just an added waste.
And by the way, it would be less expense for the applicant to not have to replace anything. Although I will say that the fences have some type of vinyl. I don't know. Is it a vinyl?
It's a vinyl.
I don't think
so
that's an ordinance. So
what I did was it was all chewed up on the front of the house and it was all chewed up on the back. All I did was replace it.
yeah, I don't know that that's up to code, but I'll leave
We
that.
did
to
get
code
a letter
enforcement.
stating that it was either replace what was torn up or tear it all out.
Say it again.
We got a letter from city stating to replace or tear it all out, so we
then maybe I'm
opted to
wrong.
replace it.
Yeah.
And then I think shortly after that, we got another letter saying something about it not being code, and it was already in, and it does help to keep, because that corner is right on the alley there by 9 Mile. I do get a lot of like excess trash blowing in the yard, so it does help to keep some of that out of the yard, and it helps to keep kids from, you know, messing with the dogs when they're walking in front of the yard and stuff like that. So until I can actually put the money front to get a privacy fence around the whole thing and go through all whatever planning we have to do to change the front fencing, because I know my front fencing is grandfathered in but technically not code, I'll do it at that time. But right now it's the only privacy I can get right there.
Okay.
And it's the only way I can keep.
I'll be honest. This body doesn't. We're not dealing with that. I was just bringing a
Yeah.
point. So I understand and can appreciate what you face. So.
Thank you.
There's one other issue just regarding the alternate fence and the placement. There is a utility pole back there that, if I remember correctly, the utility pole maybe sits, 6 inches. I didn't measure it. It sits a little in, but it would be right along the fence line. But then the wire crosses over where it'd be on the other side of the fence line.
It's a very good
Like it almost has to. It's almost hard to describe.
I've seen that.
Have you seen it? You know what I'm talking about. So we could run into an issue with that. I don't know.
It's definitely in the way of the line. You are right.
Yeah.
The
line
you mean
itself-
the guide wire or the line?
The pole and the line. The pole is on the
would be
line and the wire
pretty much
passes
in
it.
line with the fence, and then there's a guide wire or a grounding. I don't know exactly what the wire represents. I don't know.
It's a tile cable.
The tile cable.
It's like a tile cable for structural.
Okay.
Just to hold it straight up.
Yeah. So I don't know that, we can even really, we leave that to administrate. Whatever we decide, we leave that to administrative perhaps. Cardi's got a view going on there.
I had a picture at some point.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, we'll definitely work out the details of that particular issue in the field. I don't think we need to have the planning commissioners, all look at that particular issue.
I have two annoying questions. There are two different addresses referenced on the series of documents. It's 203 or 207. For the purposes of a motion, is it appropriate to reference both? Like, is the parking lot 207 and the building 203? Which is it?
I can answer that for you.
Yeah,
So the property is known to the city of Eastpointe as 18203.
yeah.
There's actually two sides to that building, and it's only mail that dictates that it's two addresses
So
there.
207 is a mailing address.
Correct.
203 is the parcel.
All Points Auto is in 18207 mailing address. 18203 is the parcel, as the city sees it.
Yes.
Yes, okay. And the other thing is, the engineering report, the date on the first page is January 29th of 2018, and then the rest of it says 2019.
Oh,
What do you want, how do you, should I just use the first one?
I think it had to be 2019, the whole report, given when we started this.
It could very well be. I mean, it's been since the beginning of time, 17 is when we got occupancy, June, and we got the letter for code violations in July. So we started on that probably beginning of 18.
But this application came into us, 6/15 of 18, so that would have been the first review by the engineer or the review you're looking at by the engineer would have been in January of 19, not 18. We wouldn't have done a review before we received the application.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the site plan for the property located at 18203 East 9 Mile Road, subject to administrative review and approval of the site plan with the following conditions. One, that there's a waiver of the masonry wall requirements in favor of the proposed alternative screening material, which is identified and provided to the Planning Commission in the packet prior to the meeting of March 5th. Two, that the applicant provide payment in lieu of the required deficient trees. Three, that the applicant comply with the requirements and the recommendations of the engineering report dated January 29th, 2018 or 2019, depending on what page you read, included in the Planning Commission packet of March 5th. And fourth, review, second reading and city council approval of the proposed zoning ordinance amendment to section 50-221.
Second.
I have a question. We never discussed the in lieu fee. We don't know what this number is.
We haven't identified that yet. That'll go to city council for their review and approval.
I'm sorry, what? I totally missed what you said.
There's no number for the in lieu fee. It's just to be determined at the meeting. So I don't know what this number is. So it could be, is it 150 or 15,000? I don't know what this is.
Yeah.
But
We'll
just
have to
take it
let-
easy on me is all I ask.
We'll have to let the applicant know at a future date.
Thank you.
In that regards, I'd like to ask Councilman DeMonico. I believe you've worked with the Beautification Commission on memorial trees.
Sure, yeah, we do the memorial trees for $200 with the little plaque and planting them, and we've also planted trees through Relief Michigan in the city.
Okay, do you know what the cost on just the tree is?
Less than $200.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's about 150. It depends on what species, so yeah, it's about 150, 175, depends on, yeah.
I just want to give the applicant a little bit of a ballpark
Sure.
on typically what trees have been costing the city.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I do have a question. Mr. Palazzolo, did you include in your motion some allowance for access to the backyard on the house on the left because they don't have a driveway. So if you don't keep an opening in there, that they will always, whoever owns or is in that house will always have to park on the street.
I really don't want to have to have anybody take the fence down that I paid to put up. I honestly think it should be a split between the residential, myself, and the city. It's on the city side, but I understand it's in the code that it's on the business owners. It's a very expensive wall.
Yeah, I mean, the way I made my motion would suggest that he needs to put in, the applicant needs to put in 126-foot, 9-inch length of the alternate screening material, which would
Okay.
cut
I
off.
just wanted to clarify
Yeah.
with you that. what you-
I mean, it's a good point. You're absolutely right, and my motion doesn't consider that. So if there are, to the chair's point, if there is a will to discuss, then we can talk about that, but
So we can allow like a 10-foot gate at that house also?
what do you think is appropriate?
I mean, I do think that
Some access,
there should be some access, however the size, I mean,
A parking space is 9 by 20,
Yeah, right.
you know.
be 18 wide.
Well, not once the amendment goes through, then it'll be, right? So-
Sure.
10.
Mary, I mean, I would lean on Laura, Mary, what is an appropriate size gate?
Yeah, so a driveway would be probably 12-foot wide.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
I mean,
that would get a car through very readily.
That's fine. I'll amend the motion to allow for I'm sorry, 12-foot, is that what you just said, Mary? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, the 12-foot allowance for the property located at, oh, now I can't find it. I had it. I know it's on Roslyn.
It's Roslyn, yeah.
Yeah, I know, the house on Roslyn,
On the west side,
the
yeah.
adjacent house on Roslyn Street.
Okay.
Who supported that motion?
John supported the original.
Support it.
And you're all right with the amendment for the gate? 12-foot gate. All right. Any further discussion? Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Palazzolo,
Yes.
Mr. DeHunt,
Yes.
Ms. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Lalonde,
Yes.
Mr. Broll,
no.
Ms. Julinski, yes. Chairman Lubeck,
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Get in contact with the building department on Monday. I believe is the next opportunity they'll be open, and you can start proceeding.
All right, it's
And thank you.
been a long time coming. Thank you, panel.
and your place does look nice.
Thank you so much. You should see inside. Looks good. Tried running a shop when the lead technicians just went to other career opportunities. Now you're looking at the only real technician. Well, we're hiring or learning, but there's really not a lot of trade professionals in the business that's available right now. So it's very, very tight times right now for me. So
It's good to be blessed with business.
thank you very much.
All right, item B was removed. Item C has been moved till after new business. We have no public hearings tonight, so that brings us to new business. Item A, Ms. Van Herent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The property located at 23349 Gratiot is required to install a masonry wall between their property and the residential property adjacent to 15854 Nicolai. The adjacent commercial property at 23337 Gratiot had the required masonry wall installed in 2000, and the remainder of the block, occupied by Hertz Rental, did their portion of the masonry wall prior to 2000. This will be the last section of wall required between the Evergreen and Nicolai. The ordinance, Section 50-232, screen wall, sets forth the requirement for this wall. A copy is attached. The Section 50-164 of the ordinance requiring a 15-foot setback for the wall to allow for clear unobstructed vision is also attached. Since half the wall required is in place, this owner should be required to complete the wall in a like material and color to within 15 feet of the sidewalk. The existing wood fence erected by the residential neighbor without a permit should be removed. I do provide a proposed ordinance should you want to take action on this.
Okay, what has triggered the need for this masonry wall at this location?
A change in occupancy. The applicant has requested to use alternate material. I believe he set that forth in his application. And the applicant is here for discussion.
Good afternoon. My name is Wanju Lee. I live in Eastpointe about more than 30 years, and I always cooperate city with Eastpointe also, and that we got a directing business in 23353 Grace Avenue about 30 years, and but city wants that location 23349 Grace Avenue, just behind the building, and Mrs. Rose down there, she lives down there. But that city wants to move the wood fence and that masonry wall or alternative wall, screen wall, something. They want to set it up down there. But I was wondering, and that why that wood fence moving? They said the city code is something, the violation. But and they asked me masonry wall, but I said I can afford it. If cheapest stone screen wall, maybe we can consideration about it. But Mrs. Ruth really want to keep the wood fence. I mean, is it a big deal or not? So, and that's the thing. Also, I got that triple bypass surgery about 2 months ago, and I got a lot of bill behind right now. We closed the business 1 month without notice. We got too many things going on right now, and if it is possible, and that we can keep the wood fence, and that it's not a big deal. That's my the opinion. Mrs. Rose.
So I own the property that is behind the businesses where the wall.
Okay, could you state your name and also print it on
sorry.
the paper that's there, please?
Oh, sure. So my name is Ruth Ann Kahn, and I own the business, or I own the house behind the businesses where the concrete wall is supposed to be put up. I've been in that house for 35 years. I will tell you, through those 35 years, I've called the city about the traffic. I have written letters in regards to putting up some type of barrier. I took it upon myself several years ago, rented a truck, got somebody to put the wooden fence up so that there was a barrier and protective fence between the house and the property. And as Lee stated, I don't know how clear he was, but he's just at a point now with losing one of his businesses in January due to his triple bypass. So it's also a matter of affordability. He owns three of the businesses from Gratiot over where the brick wall is supposed to be established. It's very expensive. He's already lost one business, and this could potentially put him into not being able to be the business owner. So I think that would be difficult for the city too, to have 3 empty businesses. But the fence that I installed a couple of years ago is a womanized dog-eared fence. Does have cement footings. It's not that large of an area. So I'm here to support my neighbor, and he's asking that we leave the wooden fence up as opposed to taking it down. You know, that, and it costs like $600 plus the rental truck. And if you have any record keeping, I think you can see or will be able to find many phone calls. I actually even had somebody from the city out, but nothing was ever done. So that's why I took it upon myself to make sure I was safe.
When did you do this?
I think probably 3 years ago.
And nobody has said anything to you
No.
since it went up? Were any of your concerns addressed from anybody in prior administrations?
I, at one time, had a younger guy come out and look at the area because it was wide open, you know. All those businesses were filled. So it, you know, and I made many phone calls as well. And nothing was ever done. That's why I put the fence up. Because it does get a lot of traffic now, but it is a good, solid barrier. And I have 2 utility poles, too.
I guess my concern is if the fence was erected and it wasn't, what's the verbiage used?
Without a permit.
It wasn't done without a permit, well, shame on the city for letting it happen and not being addressed. Why are we gonna penalize this lady now? I know that corner very well as Mr. Accavetti knows that corner very
Right.
well. And the ridiculous amount of traffic.
Yes, absolutely.
And it, you know, it's nice that the barber shop is busy, but there's a lot of traffic there. Wow, that's quite disturbing that this has been going on for 3 years and nobody
Well,
did
and I
anything.
want you to know that the reason why I just took it upon myself was because the business had increased and there was an awful lot of traffic and, you know, it just and garbage as well. So I just went and put the fence up to protect, you know, anybody coming over and.
You have a beautiful house and you're protecting your property and I can't begrudge you at all that.
Why was a permit not pulled to erect the
You know
fence?
what, I really didn't even think about it. I mean, you know, I don't know. I really didn't think, you know, my house, and I don't know, I'm just not that savvy about the rules, but you know, like I said, I don't know if you have records, but there was several letters sent to the building department and many phone calls. So, and it's, you know, that kind of money spent and then them saying, now you're gonna have to take the fence down is concerning.
Mr. Chair, I might just say I don't know the circumstances of this in particular, but unless there's a change in occupancy, we have no permission or no authority to require the masonry wall. So maybe that's why it wasn't required all these years. Or maybe if there was a change in occupancy, it wasn't recognized and you know, maybe the building department didn't issue a license or something. Maybe we didn't know about it. So a couple of things could have occurred that would have resulted in not requiring a masonry wall until this point.
Okay, the occupancy change took place at 23349 Gratiot.
That's the address of the property, yes, with the,
And there are 2 additional buildings north of that.
it's one property. And then there's one property that we're looking at tonight with, with that, that's shown on the site plan. And then there are 2 properties, Hertz Rental Car being one, and then one in the center that are also in that block.
Didn't that center building just get leased out to somebody, I think a Mimic Insurance Company or
Yes,
something like
it
that?
did.
Right, but there's a masonry wall behind it, so that,
So we're talking about the dry cleaner and the barber shop and what was the barber shop next to it.
Yes. That's correct.
So it's one property, and that's why it's requiring the masonry wall, because it was a change in occupancy. There may be 3 tenants, but it's one property.
So
But it's
if
what-
one property, Lee's been there the entire time, right? So he's been the owner, and he's still the existing owner.
But there's a change in occupancy. There's a new occupant in one of those stores.
I guess what's puzzling me is, saw those as 3 individual buildings, and then I know, with the exception of the cleaner, there have been multiple tenant changes over about the last 20 years. And that's what has me puzzled on this whole thing.
Yeah, I don't know why it wasn't imposed previously.
And I don't think that Lee owned all 3 business, the entire thing. I don't think it's been 20 years. The cleaners, yes, he's been there since, for 30-some years, but the other 2 businesses he bought, later than that. I don't think it's been 20 years. I mean, it's been a good length of time, for sure, but, he's the owner of the building and has been there for over 30 years, so.
I have a question. So, short of the respect that you have for your neighbor, how do you feel? Do you want to see something else go up? I mean, if you didn't like this man at all, and he was a horrible neighbor, or you had no relationship, would you be content with what you see there?
Absolutely, and now it goes with the flow of the house. I have the same dog ear across the front of the property, so everything matches and looks good.
That's enough for me.
So if the planning commission's considering allowing that to remain, we should consider the visual obstruction with the height of the fence at the alley for
I was
the vehicles.
saying, if that's going to remain, we do need to do something about that clear vision corner at the sidewalk in the alley.
I'm perfectly content to see this fence stay with the adjustment and setting, adjusting for the alley, or for the sidewalk, I'm sorry.
The clear vision on the side.
Clear vision, thank you. I'm tongue-tied.
I'm sure you guys know what side I'm on.
Never mind.
Yeah.
I thought you might be on the fence on this one, Mr. Broll.
He's here all night.
Yeah. Alone, probably, but yeah. Anyway. Is that your motion?
I'll wait for Mike's no vote. But yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we allow this fence to continue on with the modification that it be corrected to allow for clear sidewalks.
Clear vision?
Clear vision of
What?
Okay, we have motion and support to allow the fence to remain with a modification to provide for the clear vision requirement. Is there any further discussion?
And I'm not sure what that clear vision requirement means.
You gotta take a chunk of it out in the front at the sidewalk.
By the sidewalk.
Was it 10 feet, 15 feet?
15 feet to a height of no more than 2 feet, but we can look at the particulars of the fence itself and maybe, cut it where the middle rail would continue allowing support, and
Okay,
so we can discuss that.
okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Seeing no further discussion on this, Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. DeHunt?
Yes.
Mr. Lalonde?
Yes.
Mr. Broll?
No.
Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Palazzolo?
Yes.
Ms. Julinski? Yes. Chairman Lubeck?
Yes. Okay, new business item B, a discussion on rope lighting and a possible ordinance change. Ms. Van Haren, currently what is our ordinance on rope lighting?
Give me a minute and I'll find the ordinance section in here.
Whatever we do, I feel like we need to put Sheila's name in this, like the Ulinski rope lighting ordinance.
Of 2020?
Yeah. Sorry. Hey, it happens to the best of us.
Our ordinance doesn't address rope lighting.
Ms. Ulinski, would you like to open the discussion on this?
Okay, we know it's a pet peeve of mine. Not a pet peeve, it's more of the attractiveness of businesses. To me, the rope lighting is very bright for drivers. I feel that it's a distraction when you're driving because some of them the illumination is just incredible. And I believe that it also takes away from the look of the business. I believe that, I understand safety, but I don't think these rope lightings are a safety feature for businesses. I feel it's more of a draw attention to it with distraction to drivers and the overall appearance of a business.
The other, if I might tag in, the other thing too is a lot of these businesses that use rope lighting are leaving it on well beyond hours of operation. There's no reason to have it on well beyond the hours of operation. The people are using it as a marketing tool, is what they're doing. They're not using it to better the business. It's a marketing tool to draw attention to their business, no different than a sign. This is, and I didn't think much of it before Sheila had pointed it out, but she's completely right. If you go down 9 Mile, even 10 Mile in some areas, it's just, it's bedazzling to the point of distraction.
It hurts your eyes.
And it just looks chintzy, quite frankly.
Question for you. If somebody wanted to, and it might be way more expensive, but I'm just trying to get a gauge to understand. If somebody had rope lighting around their window, bright, I get it. What if it was not neon light? Is that the same brightness?
I don't know the illumination, but yeah, neon lights can be pretty bright. Well, with everything and technology being upgraded, I believe neon lights are probably even turning more to LED because it's more cost efficient for people for them to make it and for consumers to buy. But yeah, it's still a distraction depending on how big the sign is and how much illumination.
Yeah. So is the issue illumination?
Yes.
And presentation standards.
And presentation, yeah.
Well, when you have that much illumination, your presentation is certainly changed.
Well, from what I've noticed with the illumination levels, even on some exterior business signs, they've tried to illuminate them with the rope lighting, but the lighting level is so intense, that's all you see. You cannot read what is on the sign. The rope lighting in the windows is so intense, you don't know what business is there. You just know that there's a business there with rope lighting around the windows.
It is, I knew it was in here somewhere.
So the rope lighting ends up at the intensity levels that we're experiencing is just drawing attention to itself, more so than a business or a sign. And I'm going to ask the tough question for Ms. Van Haren. Whatever we are to decide, it's going to fall upon our code enforcement to enforce that.
Yeah, how do we get existing businesses? I mean, there's more and more in the city, and obviously, that's not going to be a pretty discussion, would be my guess.
I guess I'd first want to consult with our planner and our city attorney to see if those existing businesses were grandfathered in, as so many
I-
things are when they're already existing.
Did see on this McKenna review, I knew I saw it somewhere, rope lighting is not allowed.
Correct. So if I can just interject, under new business, item D, there's the preliminary review of the sign ordinance, and this was part of our larger technical audit of the zoning ordinance that was performed late in 2019. And as part of that, we have provided a preliminary technical review of the sign code. And typically, in municipal ordinances, that's where we see rope lighting addressed, signage illumination levels addressed. So those couple pages that talk about prohibited signs and illumination, that would be where a potential text amendment, if the commission wanted to pursue that, would be
Ms. Miller,
housed.
Ms. Van Haren, do we have a maximum illumination standard?
There are standards in the ordinance that speak to the illumination so that it can't shed onto adjacent property, that there's certain levels of light that, yeah, are permitted. Tough to check because I don't know in looking at a light. I know if it's shedding on adjacent property, that's kind of obvious, but I don't know. I don't have a light meter and I don't have any training in knowing the illumination. If it's, you know, basically if we get complaints about it, we advise the owner and they typically turn the lights lower if they have the ability to lower
Yeah,
the
I just didn't know if
illumination.
we had
but-
like a maximum, you know, like a bulb wattage.
Yeah, there is an ordinance, our ordinance does speak to that, to the maximum illumination.
I guess my thought process too is if we can do something and some of these individuals are in fact grandfathered in, which would be quite disturbing because we have way too much of it now, but if for whatever reason we had to grandfather in some of these people, I think it would be in our best interest to make sure that these lights are not on outside of business hours. So if their business closes at 9 o'clock, those lights need to go off at 9 o'clock.
But we have no such ordinance that dictates to that now.
And maybe
Right,
it would be
but
something that
my
we should do.
question is, how do you enforce that when your building department closes at 5 PM?
I'm not sure.
Because
Rope
during
light
the
tops.
day, as bright as these rope lights are, they're really not as, pretty much not noticeable at all. It's when the sun goes down. Mr. Albright,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
would we be able to craft an ordinance that would not allow these lights to be grandfathered? Perhaps put a sunset clause in them where they're only allowed to exist for a period of, say, 6 months.
Perhaps. It's possible that a sunset provision could be put in there. I would want to see, are these lights, are they part of a permanent part of the structure, or are these something of a portable nature?
There's something that just appeared to be, have been put up around window frames.
Yeah, and they're typically a low voltage. They plug in probably via an extension cord, which wouldn't be permitted, but they plug in, they don't have any great voltage included, so they're not getting electric permits to put them in. And, yeah, they're usually put on with some sort of clip around the window.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know as if something like that would necessarily be grandfathered. I mean, when you're talking, you know, a large building or a sign, for instance, that has been up there for many, many years, and it's, you know, part of the property, but something of a portable nature, like, such as rope lighting, I don't think that something like that rises to the level of getting grandfather protections. That's my personal opinion. I haven't researched the issue, but it would strike me as something like that would not be grandfathered.
Otherwise, you'd have to name everything you don't want the city to have in it. I mean, there's a myriad of products out there that we don't name. That's why we have an ordinance, right? We have prohibited, and if it's not listed as prohibited, it's not prohibited.
Yeah, for any existing properties that have so-called rope lighting, Mr. Chairman, yes, I think that if the planning commission wanted to go in that direction, having some type of sunset provision in a proposed ordinance may be advisable. But again, I don't believe something of that nature would be grandfathered.
I'm recalling, I wish I could recall much more clearly, but it was quite some time back. I believe one of the other points had eliminated neon signs from windows and had put a sunset clause in it. And I remember hearing that it was being challenged, but I don't recall ever hearing of the outcome.
You know how long ago that was?
No, I don't.
You believe it was in one of the Grosse Pointes?
Yes.
That's something I can look into.
That's what kind of, the direction I was trying to point you in is if you would have any luck in looking that up as a starting point. I have seen neon around windows that hasn't been nearly as bright.
Well,
But would we lump neon in with rope lighting? Are we talking about eliminating it totally? Are we thinking of controlling the level of illumination and hours of operation?
so the neon is the reason why this rope lighting has been a huge proliferation is, first off, because it's bright, bold, and it's marketing their business. Secondly, they don't want to spend the money on neon. This is a cheap, chintzy alternative, and the problem is it's cheapened the appearance of our city by having these things all over the place. I don't think we need any of it, quite frankly. If you're a good stand-up business, you don't need a rope lighting or a neon border around your window for people to go in and do business with you. It boils down to marketing more than anything else.
I tend to agree with you. However, there are a lot of neon lights that are not illuminated very brightly. And a good example would be a bar. I don't see anything wrong with that.
But
A
are you
neon.
saying like a Miller
But
sign
if
in
you
the
want to
window?
tie it back to illumination, because isn't that the issue? Is illumination. So, I mean, to me, that's what the issue is. They don't make, right? I mean, that would be how I look at it. I don't have a problem with neon as long as it's not glaring to the point of exactly what you are painting that picture of.
I'm okay with a sign, a neon sign, and I might even acquiesce on a low wattage, whatever you want to call it, neon border, but this rope lighting is repellent.
Mr. Chair, can I just read the intro paragraph for exterior lighting in the current ordinances? I think it'll possibly help a little bit here. It's the section 50-162. The intent of this section is to encourage site lighting that will be attractive to the eye, while at the same time adequately illuminating a site for safety and convenience. It is further the intent of this section to discourage excessively bright and harsh site illumination that creates undesirable halo effects on the property, diminishes the residential environment, presents a potential hazard to vehicle and pedestrian traffic on abutting streets and sidewalks. All exterior site lighting designed and intended to light private property shall comply with the following, and then there's a handful of, probably like 10 paragraphs after that on specific things.
What's the ordinance? What was the code number?
162.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the zoning section. Chapter, I should say.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
That neon light ordinance ban was in Grosse Pointe Woods, and there was a sunset provision that allowed them to remain after the ordinance was passed for a period of 8 years. The most recent information I see is back from 2011, so I'll contact the city attorney tomorrow, who I happen to know, in fact, his office shares the parking lot with us. I'll contact him tomorrow to find out if there was ever an appeal.
It's about time for that sunset to go down if it was 8 years.
Well, I believe 2011 was when the sun set.
I don't know if there was any.
And it's why it became an issue.
Yeah, because according to the article, several people showed up at the council meeting to contest it, and they were threatening legal action. The article doesn't go on to state whether legal action was actually pursued.
it's interesting when you're on a Board of Appeals or a Planning Commission, the little news stories that seem to catch your attention.
Yeah, the city attorney's name is Chip Birchback. I'll call him tomorrow.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, actually, I just had one question then, maybe for Ms. Van Haren. If the planning commission does want to go in this direction, can we already, I mean, according to, that's why I wanted to read the paragraph, can we already enforce this possibly with the paragraph? It sounded like it to me, but.
Okay, what was the title of that paragraph or that section?
Exterior lighting? And I,
Exterior lighting,
unless I'm wrong about the section.
except,
They've got 'em in
and
there.
I'm not arguing with you, and it is a good question. Is this exterior lighting? Because it's actually inside the building and shining out from the windows? Or is this signage? Or could it be treated as both? Or any light emanating from the building, whether through a window or a fixture mounted on an exterior wall, be considered exterior lighting? And those might be better questions for Ms. Haw and Mr. Albright. Ms. Haw looks like she's very eager to say something.
In other municipalities that we work in, we see it treated as signage. Although there are certainly other instances where interior lighting of a structure, for instance, you often see the T-Mobile stores that are lit up. That is a challenge in some municipalities, that when that light becomes excessive. So there is a little bit of overlap. But I would caution that the purpose or intent section of an article is not the same as a specific regulation.
I'll go back to the commissioners. Are we looking to eliminate it totally or just regulate the intensity of it?
The
I'm
problem.
okay with eliminating it.
I was gonna say, the problem with the intensity is, I think it was described as, she's not an expert in what's too bright.
Yeah, how do you measure it?
Well, you set a standard. If they're below it, they're okay. If they're above it, they're in violation.
But who's gonna manage it, to your point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no way to enforce that, and there's no way to check that.
Actually, there's a way to check it because the lighting should have the lumens on it. It comes in a packet, so it actually tells you what it is. So as long as they are within that limit of what our standards are, then they will be underneath it. But once you can see, what it is, it actually states it.
But that would be the maximum. If it's dimmable,
Right.
they would be obviously not have to go up to the maximum with it being dimmable.
If it's dimmable, however, they can, if we know the standard, when you said that there are I'm sorry, I'm nervous. But there are, on the books, the amount of lumens that are allowed, correct?
There is, yes.
Okay. So as long as a person, how do I want to put this? So once we can judge what that is with our eyes, honestly, you would be able to know and tell, okay, this is what that particular amount looks like. And then you can see, because you're right, as I was driving down Gratiot one day, I was driving it, I just was blinded. I was like, whoa, where did that come from? And I couldn't, I was like, whoa. And it was recent. I hadn't seen it before. So I believe that we should make sure that all of them are following the standards of what we have put on the books already.
Well, I say I'm not looking forward to Monday morning, not just because I got to get up an hour earlier, but because my commute to work is now going to be in the dark again. And I travel 9 mile pretty much the entire length of the city except for 1 or 2 blocks on the east end. And there are some very distracting buildings with the rope lighting in the windows.
There is, Mr. Chair, a Part 1F. Now, I don't know if Ms. Van Haren or Ms. Haw would, I don't know if this is relevant, sounds like it. Overall site illumination, no property shall exceed 4 1/2 foot candles of maximum overall light intensity. Sounds like we already have numbers in here. No property shall exceed 1/2 foot candle of maximum light intensity along any residential zoning district line, and light intensity shall be measured at 0.4 feet from the ground. I guess it's talking about residential in the second part of that, but.
Yeah, so we certainly incorporate those provisions when we're doing a site plan for construction, when they're putting lights outside, when they're illuminating parking lots and buildings and the such, and require that the fixtures that they provide meet those light requirements. Again, I don't know if those lumens transfer to this rope lighting, and this rope lighting is inside the building, not outside the building.
Well, that's kind of what I was gonna say. So if we have a standard, I guess, I mean, you have, obviously different types of bulbs. Do they all equate to the same number? Right, so they're all gonna be different, so again, how would you, I would like to see it all go away.
I'm with you. Yeah, I'll support you on that too. Yeah, you're saying anything that you can see externally, right? So if somebody had a building and they had a certain area that they had rope lighting inside of it that you couldn't see outside, that's fine, right?
I'm with that.
Right? Whatever they want to do inside, as long as you can't see it outside.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes. I mean, I
Okay,
definitely.
I'll support you on that.
I mean, there is a lot of wisdom to completely eliminating it. I see Mr. Curley sitting out there, and sat with him on the zoning fence and signboards of appeals for many years. And we always had a discussion about window signs. And how do you measure and how do you enforce it from the standpoint of every building having a different number of permitted amount of window coverage and temporary signage? And it was always a headache. And so there is, I'm guessing, at least a consensus at this point to completely eliminate rope lighting that is visual external to a building. So then we will need Ms. Haw and Mr. Albright to craft something to add into our ordinance to that effect.
And not to grandfather anyone.
And call it the Ulinski Illumination.
Okay, who made that motion?
Shall I make?
Come on, Miss Ulinski.
Go on, you make the motion.
Come on,
It's
this
your
is the
baby.
bill.
I didn't know we were making a motion. I thought we were getting more information from Ms. Hall and Mr. Albright.
No, we're ready to go.
Well, then I make a motion to do away with all rope lighting in the city. No one to be grandfathered in on the rope lighting that can be seen from the outside of any business around their windows, doors. Do we have to change? It says possible ordinance change. Are we changing any other part of the ordinance? This is a discussion.
Well, not at this time if we're focusing just on this.
Just want to check.
Second.
We have motion and support. Any further discussion?
We, you need to put in a time limit, I mean, like,
Oh, to give them time to take it down?
you know, yeah, you know, like, I think Mr. Albright said that City of Grosse Pointe gave it 8 years.
We're not doing 8 years.
No, that's way too high, but
I'll give them 60 days.
Come
That's
on,
my
be
point.
generous. Give him 90.
Maybe we could just include in the motion to have some options drafted up by
Yes.
our planner, and we can review them.
We're just directing them to
meeting.
draft
Just
what
for them to write it,
the
and
ordinance.
then we'll review it.
All right, Ms. Ulinsky. Let me be the devil's advocate here. How many residents do you want to tick off at Christmas time?
Well, we did say businesses. I didn't say residents, and personally, I love the Christmas lights.
Commissioners, you could add a provision that would exclude Christmas lights or holiday lights during the month of, December and January.
And November.
And October, because a lot of people tend to decorate for Halloween.
St. Patrick's Day's coming up, so.
Any holiday?
All right, so we've given you some ideas of when we might want to allow residential lighting for a holiday. Any further discussion on this? Secretary, please call the roll.
Ms. Ulinsky, yes. Mr. DeHunt?
Yes.
Mr. Broll?
Yes.
Mr. Lalonde?
Yes.
Mr. Palazzolo?
Yes.
Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Chairman Lubeck?
Yes. New business, item C, master plan implementation strategy. Is this going to be Ms. Ha? Okay.
Thank you. In your packet, there is a memo dated January 25th, 2020. And this refers to implementation of the Commission and City's 2040 Master Plan. So as your annual report to the City Council stated, this year is a time to start implementing projects of the 2040 Master Plan that was adopted last year. And on the back of the memorandum is a table that lists the high priority projects that were identified in the 2040 Master Plan and the theme classification that they were listed under is also provided, as well as the time frame. And you'll notice then the last column has a plus sign if that project is impacted by a text amendment to the zoning ordinance. Because the master plan is the forward-thinking vision for the community, but the zoning ordinance is the tool, the mechanism that the city has to achieve that vision. So there's a close tie between these projects and making sure that your zoning ordinance reflects that type of community character and development that you wish to see. There are two very relevant projects, we believe, on this high priority list, and that includes a revision to the signage ordinance, specifically the design standards to ensure uniformity and architectural character is represented based on different zoning districts. And then also to develop a zoning district or overlay district for the 9-mile corridor. And to kind of jumpstart that discussion, McKenna prepared a technical audit of the zoning ordinance, and that's the following memorandum dated January 29th. And this lists all the current sections of the ordinance and recommendations for each. Some are more lengthy than others. And of course, something like the 9-mile new zoning district or overlay district would be an additional add to this audit. After performing the audit, we didn't see any glaring changes that need to be made immediately, but there are a number of recommendations that we that we make on page 10 and 11 of that memo to better position the city to implement the master plan and make sure that the development that you receive in the next year, 2 years, corresponds and furthers your master plan. So we're happy to take direction from the commission if there are any text amendments that you'd like to make or any of these priority projects that you feel are pressing.
Mr. Chair, could I make a comment or regarding this? We're in that time of year where we're doing the budget, and for the fiscal year we're currently in, which is the 1920 fiscal year, or not fiscal, the fiscal year that will end actually on June 30th, so the 1920 budget year. We don't have money budgeted for this, but we're looking at our budget now, and I would like to propose that we include some for the next fiscal year so that we can address some of these issues. And so perhaps I can talk to Laura afterwards and get some cost proposals from them to actually create a budget to present before City Council so that we can have some funding for this. Because at this point, we just don't have funding to do these kind of ongoing changes to the ordinance.
So would it be in our best interest to table this discussion until you find out what your budget is?
Probably to table it, but I think that also before we actually start having them work on it specifically or any more than we've done, but I think that the Planning Commission probably also wants to have some discussion about where they'd want to begin, and maybe in reviewing a proposal from McKenna, we could see how much of this could be accomplished in a year, how much work it takes and cost is involved, so we'd know if we're going to try to tackle this in 1 year or 3 years, or how we'd move forward.
I do have a question about the high priority projects. And specifically, the one that's really sticking out in my mind, it says that it's ongoing, is provide well-designed crosswalks to increase motorist awareness and pedestrian safety. How do we... There's a lot of pedestrians that are taking great liberties in crossing the streets in various locations that are not pedestrian walkways. So I guess my question is, if this is a high priority and it's ongoing, what are we doing to manage that and to make those walkways better? Because if we're not going to do anything, are we putting new lighting in? Are we putting striping in? What are we doing to make these things better? Because if we're not doing anything, it's really not an ongoing thing. So I guess my concern is, I hearken back to that whole 8 Mile fiasco over there, because people are dashing across the streets to catch a bus, to do whatever. Are we doing the pedestrians a justice? What are we doing to make the pedestrian walkway safer, the intersection safer, the crosswalk safer? What are we doing that's ongoing, that's making it better? And I question that.
Well, the city's done a few things, but they haven't involved the Planning Commission, and maybe that's a greater discussion that we need to have with our Public Works, who works on these kind of projects, our City Council, as well as Planning, to kind of coordinate the joint effort of these groups in looking at those things. Recently they put in the new crosswalks by the police department and the court so that they would have a safer pedestrian crossing to get over to the ancillary parking for the court that's across the street and beyond the bank and down by the library.
Has that been effective? Because I keep hearing about accidents and things happening over there. Has it actually been effective?
Well, I think the accidents have been some cars running into the curbing that hasn't been there before, but we now have a crosswalk there that's, pedestrian crosswalk and a refuge island for them to stand in if they don't make it across all the way. But again, the Planning Commission had no part in that, and perhaps they should.
I guess I'm just concerned. I'm concerned about our resident safety in crossing Gratiot. I'm concerned about our resident safety in a society now where people are very distracted, whether it's a cell phone or rope lighting or whatever the case may be. And I don't know if there's an answer, but I'd certainly love for somebody to find a better way to make our crosswalks and our pedestrian walkways safer.
So that crosswalk on 9 Mile by the police station, that was put in by the county
No,
or funded by the county?
no, the Refuge Islands was approved by City Council with a grant from MDOT, though, where it was a cost-sharing agreement. We paid 10%, I think, 10 or 20 at most, somewhere in between, somewhere around there. It was 55,000 was our share. I don't remember what the total cost was, but City Council approved those refuge islands. And I think to Mr. DeHaan's point, I think the only practical solution to, I was assuming that's the crossing everyone was talking about. I haven't pitched this to anyone yet, but it's just moving the bus stop a little further from Gratiot, and then maybe people would cross there because the bus stop is closer. Is between the refuge island we were hoping they'd use and Gratiot. But yeah, I've driven by a few times and the entire group of people crosses, and if 10 are crossing, nobody is gonna go walk even just 25 feet the other way to take it if everyone else is doing it. Just in practical terms, obviously it's jaywalking, and I believe
And that's the
we
bigger
recently
problem.
gave out 80 jaywalking tickets or something like that. It was a large amount of jaywalking tickets, and I think somewhere right there. But yeah, I guess that'd be good discussion for the planning commission, though.
My greatest concern is 8, 9, and 10 Mile, because that seems to be where people are taking liberties at darting across the streets, and I don't know how it's fixed. I don't know if it's something that can be fixed.
That happens on Gratiot all the time, too.
I'm just worried that some little kid's gonna run across the street one day and somebody is gonna be screwing around with their phone and this little kid's gonna get hit. Or some little old lady's gonna be walking out of the Chesterberry complex and I just don't know what's gonna happen. And
Well, for that matter, you have all that distracted driving and speed racing driving on the side streets.
yeah, sorry, I'm sure I digressed here, but it's been weighing on my mind for a long time. And I'd love to see if there was a way that within the master plan implementation, we can find a way to make it better.
I think that's the exact reason for this, actually, Mr. Town.
So we'll pull some budget numbers together and
Well, this might be a good point in time to bring up something I've mentioned before. We've talked about having some joint meetings with city council. Call them the fifth meetings, because they take place when there's a fifth Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday in a month. And the fifth Thursdays this year are occurring on April 30th, July 30th, October 29th, and one I'm automatically going to cross off December 31st.
good idea.
And if it's a Tuesday, the most recent fifth Tuesday is going to be at the end of this month. But I believe that the planning commission does need to get with city council on these so that we both have the same set of priorities. Because we could sit here and decide we think this is a priority, meanwhile, council's got something else going. And also at that time, it gives them an opportunity to get more involved in how much they're going to have to budget if they're serious about this.
Mr. Chair, are you proposing a joint meeting to city council?
Yes.
Could we, instead of trying to tackle all the high priority projects in one fell swoop, maybe we just take a chunk of them?
Well, find out amongst the high priority projects, which ones have priority.
Then maybe we need to get the input of council and find out what they feel, and then
That's why I feel we need to have a meeting.
Is April 30th, is that then what, if you
That
wanna
would
go
be the first, fifth Thursday.
And then that would give everyone plenty of time to consider the different items and what's most important.
Unless somebody has a conflict with that date, I would,
Does the other member of council present have a conflict?
it's the last Thursday.
Right?
I was hoping to get 40% of us on board, but
It's the last day in April, Harvey.
I think a meeting's important, but I can't.
Well, obviously, this would have to go back to council to get there. So we're okay with the proposal of April 30th to do that. Okay.
I'll remind you tomorrow.
Do we need to make a motion for that?
I think council would probably.
I think if you're all in agreement with
Mr.
that.
Albright indicates that we probably should make a motion to that
That
effect.
way the record's clear.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we work with City Council to have a special meeting the last Thursday of April, which would be the 30th, at which point we will discuss the high priority projects or the priorities that are the projects that have the highest priority within the master plan.
I'll support.
We have motion and support. Any further discussion? 7 PM for that meeting?
So long as Mary brings water.
Bring your own.
I don't bring water.
Was it trouble to go earlier for anyone? I think you guys discussed that before, because I think council's not against going earlier, if, in general.
I think Tim is.
I could maybe do
Okay.
6:30.
6:30.
6:30's.
6:30's fine.
Mr. Lubeck, will you be sharing the meeting?
Pardon?
Will you be sharing the meeting?
Usually when we've had these meetings, it's kind of been a co-chair type situation. You can make that recommendation, and if everyone's okay with it, I wouldn't object. All right. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. DeHunt,
Yes.
Mr. Lalonde,
Yes.
Mr. Broll,
Yes.
Ms. Moore,
Yes.
Ms. Julinski, yes, Mr. Palazzolo,
Yes.
Chairman Lubeck.
Yes. New business item D, preliminary review of the sign ordinance. Is that going to be Ms. Ha or Mr. Madigan?
It will be Mr. Madigan, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Following recent discussions about items such as rope lighting from earlier tonight, roof signs and murals, past meetings, we've prepared a preliminary technical review of your sign ordinance, which is attached in the memo dated January 27th, 2020. A review and update of your sign ordinance is in line with the 2040 Eastpointe Master Plan, which notes that changes to the zoning ordinance and text map are expected over time, and is identified as a priority project in the master plan, and is listed as the most important priority for the commission to review within 1 to 5 years. Any review and update of the sign ordinance must ensure that the requirements within comply with the Supreme Court ruling in Reed v. Town of Gilbert. In this case, the Supreme Court held that the Gilbert sign provisions were content-based regulations of speech. Compliance with the Supreme Court ruling would require special attention be paid to removing or revising any standards in the Eastpointe sign ordinance which restrict or permit signs based on their content. Beyond a review and update of the ordinance regulating private signs, a sign inventory and analysis along key corridors in the city would help reduce visual clutter, further retaining the character of Eastpointe, and identify areas where additional pedestrian traffic calming signage is necessary or in need of repair. Again, our technical review of the city's sign ordinance was largely based to ensure that it is in compliance with that 2015 Reed v. Town of Gilbert Supreme Court decision, which rendered nearly all U.S. sign codes unconstitutional. It is important to ensure that Eastpointe's ordinance is content neutral and it fosters the type of design and character the community desires. As with the items Laura mentioned earlier, should the Planning Commission wish to proceed, the next step would be conduct a more detailed review and prepare substantial changes to the ordinance, including uniformity of signage in the city's zoning districts, numbers of signs, and character concerns. A draft text could be presented to the Planning Commission for revisions in a public hearing and ultimately presented to the City Council. If commissioners have any questions on specific elements of the technical review we provided, I'm happy to answer those.
Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Madigan? So how would we like to proceed on this?
Well, I would say that given it's part and parcel of the overall conversation about priorities within the master plan itself, we would wait until the joint session. If we collectively or individually have a particular opinion about the prioritization of the review of the sign ordinance, we would voice it at that time, because there would need to be a budget for further review and analysis and rewrite and all of that. So I think it's on hold, much like anything else, until the April 30th meeting, where we can identify priorities and then ask council to approve a budget for a certain amount of those priorities, and then have McKenna prepare a cost proposal, given the resources that are available.
Can all these memos just be, the McKenna memos be forwarded to all of council then, when we contact them about this?
Okay, I was under the impression council was receiving a copy of the Planning Commission packets.
Well, okay, yeah, they probably have it printed, but just as a reminder then.
Okay.
Yeah, no, they should all have. Yeah.
Trying to save a few trees.
Oh, I meant an email, not don't print it again. Yeah, just like when we're contacting about this meeting.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. If there's no objection, we'll move on to item C from unfinished business, which is the medical marijuana draft ordinance. And unfortunately, it has happened again. Several times, Mr. Curris has come and asked some questions and failed to stay long enough for us to provide an answer to his question. In regards to marijuana facilities in the downtown district, I believe it might have been as far back as a year and a half ago, in a joint meeting with City Council. It was decided, Planning Commission and City Council, that they did not want to put any marijuana facilities in the downtown area. And that's back, one of the first decisions that was made in regards to this issue. So that's why nothing has taken place and no further discussion has taken place, is because that's something that was already well decided between planning and City Council. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, Councilman DeMonico?
No, I call that from the map that I think Ms. Haw made regarding the potential locations for the, we left the DDA area out, as you just suggested.
And as much as I respect Mr. Curris's passion and his family's commitment to the city, I don't think there's going to be this massive flow of fiscal largesse coming into the city. I mean, it's not about it's never been about fiscal, what are we going to put in the pocket? I mean, if that were the case, then the story's completely different. So I don't see this big boom that he seems to think is going to happen if it were even allowed in the DDA. God bless him for being as passionate. I'd love to have a business I could sell for that much money, but it's not about what the money is to the city. It should be revenue neutral. That's what we've been told at various joint meetings. That's what a number of individuals have come up and said. It's going to be revenue neutral if you're lucky. I like making a profit as much as the next guy, but we're not here to make a profit. We're here to be neutral financially.
Okay, we've had an opportunity to review all of the changes that we've tried to incorporate into this document that we now need to act upon by way of sending it to City Council as a recommendation. So, are there any glaring errors that you found in your review of it, commissioners?
When they say no establishment can be within 100 feet of a dwelling, is that the property line or the physical structure of the house?
Mr. Albright?
Property line.
I believe I saw in there that we reference distances as property line to property line.
Yeah, D.
Yeah, we had that discussion, that's right.
Yeah, in fact, that's set forth on page 2, paragraph E, where it does say measured from property line to property line. It's clear.
Although that's specific from.
Well, you know, now I'm reading, hold on for a second. Medical marijuana provision centers, should it be provision centers or provisioning, first off? So medical marijuana provision centers shall not be closer than 1,000 feet from any other medical marijuana facility measured from property line to property line. So, the way I'm reading this is you can't put two medical marijuana businesses within 1,000 feet of each other. So what was Mr. Lalonde asking was from property line to property line. So the question now begs, where is, all right, so if the property line is 99 feet away from a residential, does that automatically, or are they out? Because we're talking, in this section, it's talking about provisioning center or medical facility to medical facility. But what about home to facility?
Well, so the page previous to that, page 1, under section 50-260, toward the bottom third of the page, buffer zones and separation standards. Buffer zone is defined as the area within 100 feet of the following. And again, maybe we just want to reiterate, measured from property line to property line.
Is it not, it's not in here, is it?
It's not in there again in reference to any property within with a residential dwelling unit.
Then I think it needs to be clearly defined in there then.
Commissioners, if I can interject on page 3, where it talks about general provisions for separation standards. It states the separation distance requirements described in the buffer zone shall be computed by direct measurement in a straight line from the nearest property line of the land used for such purposes, which would be a medical marijuana facility, to the nearest, that would be a residential use or a public park or a public school or a public child care center, to the nearest portion of the building, structure, or unit in which a medical marijuana facility is located. So the separation distance from a residential unit would be the residential property line to the, in a direct line, 100 feet to the building that would house the medical marijuana facility. If you're computing the separation distance between a provisioning center, then that is letter D on page 2, where it speaks to that's property line to property line. But I do believe under D, the commission had previously discussed that it should be medical marijuana provisioning centers shall not be closer than 1,000 feet from any other medical marijuana provisioning center. Because there was concern that 1,000 feet wouldn't be necessary if it was between a provisioning center and a lab for testing. So D would need to be amended if that was the commission's intent to read, shall not be closer than 1,000 feet from any other medical marijuana provisioning center, measured from property line to property line.
So, if I understand it correctly, what you're saying then is the medical marijuana provisioning centers shall not be closer than 1,000 feet from medical marijuana facility measured from property line to property line. However, any of the other distances that we have written into this, 100 feet from residential, 500 feet from schools, is measured from the nearest point of a property line to the corner of the building?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
The nearest point of the structure in which the facility is housed. So that separation standard is a little bit more lenient because it's not just going to the property line, but it's going further to the extent of the building.
Is that something that can be measured easily?
Within,
To measure from the property line to the corner of the building?
if the city's GIS has that capability.
We can measure that, within a few feet.
I guess I just wonder why we have different standards. One is from property line to property line, the other is property line to the corner of the building. It doesn't make
We should be
sense.
consistent.
That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, we should be consistent.
The zoning.
I don't know which one's the right one, but it just doesn't make sense to have inconsistent.
The right one is what we decide is the right one.
The zoning ordinance today currently has both measurements for separation standards.
Right. I know, we ran into that where we saw that there were inconsistencies within our zoning.
Correct.
Right.
Was that discrepancy referenced in the review of the zoning ordinance?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
All right, let me go back to what's on page 2, item D. So from any provisioning center to any other medical marijuana facility of any type, which of the ones that this ordinance would permit would be secure transport or testing facility.
That's how it's currently written, but I do recall the commission discussing that
So,
that would just be provisioning to
The
provision.
way that's written, I could have a transporter sitting right next door to a testing facility. And that's okay.
Mhm.
But I could not have a transport or a testing lab within 1,000 feet of a provisioning center.
Correct.
Is that what we want?
I don't need that.
I mean, I
think
could
the
see the
intent-
1,000 feet between provisioning center and provisioning center.
That was the intent.
I'm just questioning the spacing between a provisioning center and the other two types of facilities.
No, we should add provisioning facilities.
Medical marijuana facilities. Is that what you're saying?
Medical marijuana provisioning facility. So it would be from,
Medical marijuana provisioning center shall not be closer than 1,000 feet from any other medical marijuana provisioning center.
Yes.
Provisioning facility. Provision, whatever. Pick a term.
Well, I was just keeping the
Yeah.
terminology consistent with what was in the first line there. Is everyone on board with that?
Yes.
Pretty much so.
Now to the other question of measuring distances that Mr. DeHaan had. What is the commission's thought on that? Should we have consistency?
Absolutely.
Takes the guesswork out.
Takes the guesswork out, as Sheila said. She's right.
So where was that other change needed then?
Page 3.
Number 3.
So in the second part of that, it would say the nearest property line of the medical marijuana facility.
Or you could just insert property line and delete the word portion.
Right.
So in 3, we want to go from property line to property line.
Right. Well, don't stop at portion. Go all the way to,
I deleted the word portion, so it'll say.
right.
To the nearest property line of the building structure or unit in which the medical marijuana facility is located.
Yeah. Property line on which, the property on which the
Okay.
facility is located. Yeah.
Any other comments on that? We're all in agreement?
Did you want to add the words on which? So it would be 4 words, property line on which the building structure or unit in which medical marijuana facility is located.
I mean, I think it's, if you're talking about the property line of the facility, you would generally think that the facility is within the boundaries of the line, right? I am sure there is a creative attorney somewhere out there that will challenge you on this, and you will be well prepared to defend us against it. However, yeah, I don't know what sort of trans-dimensional, argument that would be, but yeah, nearest property line of the medical marijuana facility, I think would be sufficient. Question.
Typically, questions are not allowed at this time.
No, I'm gonna shoot that.
Anything else? Did we want to go over the section beginning on page 11, number 4?
Weren't these the ones that we were deferring to state?
Right, yeah,
I just wanted to
yeah,
wanted to see if you were paying attention there.
yeah.
They're more regulatory.
Yes.
Sometimes.
The only things I think we collectively would like to recommend are the amendments to section 50 with the addition of 258 through 261, right? And leave everything else to the review of administration and council. Right.
Good to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions, or someone prepared to make the motion to recommend this to council?
I'll make a motion to recommend the medical marijuana draft ordinance with the adjustments we just made to city council.
Can you be specific about which ordinance amendments we're talking about?
Knew you were gonna do that, Tim.
Sorry.
Are you? Okay.
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that they were under section 50, 259, item
It's
D on page 2. We were referring to it as a medical marijuana center.
Mike, I think
I'm sorry.
Mr. Albright can help you here.
It would actually be section 50-260, subsection D. The planning commission would be adding the words provisioning center and deleting the word facility, and also in the first line, changing the word provision to provisioning. And the other amendment would be on page 3. This would be under section 50-261, subsection 3. The words property line would be inserted in front of the word portion, which would be deleted.
Yep, that's it. Thank you.
I'll support that.
Any further discussion? Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Brill?
Yes.
Mr. Palazzolo?
Yes.
Mr. DeHunt?
Yes.
Mr. Lalonde?
Yes.
Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Julinski, yes. Chairman Lubeck?
Yes. That brings us to the second hearing of the public. This is the opportunity for anyone in the audience who would like to address us to do so now. You'll have 3 minutes to do so. Does anyone wish to be heard? Yes, sir. Please print your name on the paper there so we know who you are in the record.
Harvey Curley. I know, being a member of the council, we're going to get this document whenever. I would hope soon, so we can take it home and take some time to read it. Just one question. If it's 100 feet between the residential property line and the, what did you say, the edge of the building, the corner of the building? What is it?
It was changed to property line to property line.
So if you go property line to property line and somebody wants to build the facility, and the property of that facility is the parking lot, and it goes, and the only thing separating that facility and the residential is a brick wall, and the brick wall is 2 feet wide. So in other words, you're 2 feet, so you're 98 feet short.
regular building setback requirements would still be applicable for any structure.
Well, but they said they're not going to measure from the building, they're going to measure from the property line.
Meaning that the.
So the property line, on the property line of wherever the place might be built is, there's the end of the property line for that building, and then the residential was right there, and the only thing separating is either a couple bushes or a brick wall. Is that right?
It's like saying you can't have, say, two fast food restaurants adjacent to one another. There has to be a distance requirement, so it would be from the property line of one fast food restaurant to the property line of another fast food restaurant, and any actual restaurant or structure on that building would be subject to the setback requirements for the front, side, and rear for that particular building. And depending on the zoning district, Mary, does that vary in different zoning classifications as far as the buildings and the setback requirements?
Sure, yes, it does.
Well, Mr. Albright, I think Mr. Curley, though, is asking commercial to residential. Right, Mr. Curley?
Yeah.
Don't mean to interrupt. Let's not take Mr. Curley's 3 minutes away, though.
Say what?
Let's not take your 3 minutes away.
Don't take it away?
We're not going to take your 3 minutes
Okay.
away.
Oh, that's right, I want to get 3 minutes. Well, okay, obviously, Mr. Albright, I'll ask you the same question, and I can be able to hear you because I can't hear you from here. So I'll be sitting next to you at the council meeting, and I don't see this getting to the agenda on the council till the end of April, 1st of May. We're already into the end of February. There's no more meetings in February, so, yeah.
It would be whenever city administration places a request that be placed on the agenda through the city manager's office.
Yeah, and typically I would get it on the second meeting in March, so it would come before you a week from Tuesday.
Oh, good.
Doesn't mean you have to take action on it that day, but that's when you would.
As long as we get it a week in advance so we can read it. I don't know how many pages it is, but it's probably several. But great job. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for that. And I still have a lot of questions, but you don't have another hour, so I'll ask them at the council table. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to be heard? Yes, sir. Again, if you would state your name for us and also print it on the paper that's up there.
Thank you for the opportunity. Good evening. I was just going to address the same issue, Mr. Curley. Am I correct? Yeah. Said if you look at the map on the one you're approving on 9 Mile, there's hardly any properties that they are 100 feet between commercial and residential. There isn't. So maybe change to 8 Mile or 10 Mile or Gratiot maybe, because there's only wall between all the properties on 9 Mile, if there is a wall. If they were grandfathered in, there's no wall. If there is a wall, then there's the only wall is separating the commercial properties from the residential. Thank you very much.
Anyone else wish to be heard? Anyone else wish to be heard? Seeing none, we will close the second hearing of the public, and we will go to commissioners' comments. I'll start this evening with Ms. Ulinski.
I actually just wanted to say thank you for putting my item on the agenda, and thanks for all the hard work that everyone did on that medical marijuana ordinance. I know we've grumbled about that for hours and hours and hours. Glad it's come to an end for now.
Mr. DeHunt?
I voted yes to approve the marijuana amendment because I did that as a resident of the city of Eastpointe. Personally, it's not my thing. I had to separate my personal views from the vote that I made tonight. And I know that this city, there has been a lot of votes being taken over the last however many, it seems like a year, of things that are popular, things that aren't popular, and there's been a lot of ugliness. But sometimes you just got to do what's best for the masses versus the few. So I applaud people that are willing to fly in the face of convention, but I also applaud people that are willing to stand up for the masses. That's it.
Mr. Palazzolo?
Thank you. Yeah, I have three things. First of all, congratulations to Ms. Ulinski on the hopefully soon-to-be Ulinski rope lighting ordinance. I think that'll be fantastic.
I believe that's rope lighting prohibition ordinance.
Yeah, right. The Ulinski prohibition, I love it. Secondly, welcome to Ms. Moore.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We hope that you will have as much fun as we all do debating with each other ad nauseum. Thirdly, I usually don't use this time to express a personal view, but in this case, I will. I will follow in the footsteps of Mr. DeHunt here. I also do not approve of the ordinance that we just recommended to council. I believe that the separation requirements to residential districts are too low, and I think that we allowed for too many facilities, to be honest with you. I think that a more prudent approach would be to let less be more and see who the best and most competitive operators are and let them flourish in an environment where we have quality controls in place, where we have time to let the marijuana industry develop as it will, and see what happens. And I think that we're a little too liberal in our allowances, but that's not my final say. That said, I think at some point we do need to push the issues forward, and I'm glad that we have finally done that, and I hope and I sincerely hope that we never have to talk about medical marijuana anytime in the next at least year. So if we can do that, I will be very happy.
Mr. Broll?
Thank you. I was reappointed to the board at the last meeting, so I would like to express my appreciation to City Council for those that voted for me. Welcome, Commissioner Moore. And I would also just like to thank Mr. Jakubiak for his service. That's a guy who wears Eastpointe on his sleeve and really cared about the position, cares about the city, and I appreciate that. So thank you for your service. Thank you.
I'll move down to Mr. Lalonde.
I just want to thank Walt for his service on this commission. You're one of the hardest working members. I know you work a lot harder than I do, and I always appreciate it. And best of luck. I know you serve on other commissions, and I just want to say on behalf of the commission, thank you for your service. That's it.
Come back to Ms. Moore.
I just want to thank everyone that gave me an opportunity to move forward with this. I served before about 10 years ago, and with honor and with pleasure. I am just thankful to be able to bring the different twist to everything. And I'm going to serve honorably on this board with all of my fellow commissioners.
Mr. Albright?
Yes, on behalf of the City Attorney's Office, Ms. Moore, we welcome you, and congratulations to the commission on getting through its review of probably the most thoroughly reviewed ordinance or proposed ordinance in the city's history. Lots of hours were spent over the course of a long, long time. So, congratulations.
Councilman DeMonico?
Thanks, Mr. Lubeck. Welcome, Ms. Moore. Welcome back, Mr. Brawl and Mr. Palazzolo. Just a couple items, just in case you missed it, which I'm guessing none of you did, but maybe a couple people in the audience maybe. The container homes proposal, as we said earlier, was not approved by city council, so that's not going through. That wasn't my vote, but that's what happened. And then the street lighting assessment was renewed. We were given 2 items. We proposed 2 different options. Essentially, one option, let me back up. As everyone knows, you pay $31.18 right now per year for street lighting assessment. And then Mr. Blum had proposed 2 different options to us. One where we just do it again without putting any new streetlights in, and then one proposal including 120 streetlights, I believe it was, over the next 3 years. City council approved the latter to add 120 streetlights over the next 3 years. So that'll increase the street lighting assessment $2 or $3. The other one would have reduced it down to 23 and change, something like that. Yeah, thanks for finishing the medical marijuana ordinance today, as Mr. Albright stated. And all of you probably, actually right before I get to the assessments, if anyone's, we've talked about a lot of different things about, well, especially when we're talking container homes or Habitat for Humanity. There is this standard the United Way's come up with. It's called ALICE, and you can Google it and figure out what it stands for. It's another way of, instead of just doing the poverty line that the U.S. government does, they essentially add in other normal costs like a cell phone that everyone has these days, and comes up with essentially their own poverty line. It's an interesting report to review, so I'd recommend reviewing it. And then if anyone got their assessment bill, they probably, some of you got a $1 million increase in taxes this year. But I did get my new one today that has the appropriate number, but just make sure you know that that's not the true number, just the one number at the end of the sentence, nothing in the table. All the tables were correct, but apparently there was a major screw up on the assessment. Otherwise, we will be able to fund all of the master plan items that are on the list.
Based on mine, we would be repaving the streets with gold.
I think you're right. And that's all I had, Mr. Lepard. Thanks.
Mr. Madigan, any comments tonight?
I don't have anything. Thank you.
Ms. Hall, welcome back.
Thank you.
No comments? Ms. Van Haren?
I do, thank you. We're excited about an opportunity that the city of Eastpointe has to partner with the DIA to create a wall mural, to create a highly visible public work of art that expresses the stories and identities of the community. The goals are to help people explore, express, and strengthen their sense of community, create a highly visible work of public art, and expand and deepen the relationship between the DIA and communities through Southeast Michigan. We're considering a location that would be in the Children's Garden on the wall of the credit union. Great visibility for northbound traffic, as well as good visibility for walking pedestrians in the DDA area. We're going to invite a member of the Planning Commission, someone who's hopefully available during the day, because that's when we'll meet with the DIA, and a member of the DDA also to our next meeting to look at the proposals that the artist comes up with for the mural. And this is being paid for by the DIA, but truly it's coming out of your taxpayer dollars that you pay for the services of the DIA, and so it's money back into our community. And it will come before the Planning Commission. Planning Commission doesn't really have approval authority for a mural, but you have, you review it, and once it's determined that the mural is not intended for advertising or otherwise attracting attention to the business at which it's located, then it can be approved. So it will come before you for that purpose. And come before the city council too, not so much for their approval, but for everyone's acceptance of the proposed. We did do a survey online, and we had paper copies of it for people. We got pretty good. I think it was between 80 and 90 responses, and with lots of good ideas. And so the artists will take those into consideration when looking at the, what the content of the mural would be and how it'll look. So just wanted everyone to know about that in advance. It's just our second meeting with the DIA, and I think it's going to be a neat thing for the city of Eastpointe.
I have a question on that. Does that mean that other mural's going to be removed? The one that's been on the plywood and the wooden poles?
That's been down for
or
some
poles?
time now.
Has it?
Yeah, the posts are still there.
I guess I don't get by that way much.
The posts will be removed, and that's not our absolute only alternative or idea for where it might be located. We're going to talk with them first, and as long as we can come to an agreement, and if that doesn't work out, another location will work out. So, but right now, yeah, those murals that were on the wood and mounted to the posts have been removed several years ago, or a couple years ago. Yeah. So. And I also will welcome Sylvia Moore to the Planning Commission and look forward to getting your ideas on things. And that's all I have tonight.
Thank you.
Ms. Van Haren, I think you misspoke.
Uh-oh.
When you said the planning commission member should be somebody who's available during the day. Thank you for singling me out. Being the only retiree on this board.
Man. Well, then,
That's it.
Then you'll be it.
Okay, my comments, I'd like to thank Walt Jakubiak. I spent time with him on the Zoning Board of Appeals. I've spent time with him here on Planning Commission. He has a unique approach to things, and he has a passion. And Walt, I hope you keep coming here and keeping us on our toes, but limit it to 3 minutes. Ms. Moore, welcome. We're serious about what we do here, but we also have a little bit of levity. Because I think some nights if we didn't, we would have been crazy long ago. And with that, I will conclude my comments. That moves us on to training. There is no scheduled training tonight, so we need a motion for adjournment.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we call it a day.
I'll support.
We have a motion by Mr. DeHaan, supported by Mr. Palazzolo, that we adjourn. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. DeHunt?
Yes.
Mr. Palazzolo?
Yes.
Mr. Lalonde? Yes. Mr. Broll?
Yes.
Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Julinski, yes. Chairman Lubeck?
Yes.
Good job.
So nervous. Maybe it'll prompt some others to,
After every meeting,
Yeah.
we usually go with Milestone Restaurant.
Oh, yeah, nice.
What we're gonna be.
No, they'll,
I love Milestone. They are
What?
Yes.
You gotta try the corn.
and,
That is my favorite candy.
It's Wiggly's.
I think I'd remember the names. I don't.
Yeah.
There were two guys that were
But you are
the proclamation of an emergency, I would recommend that proclamation is confirmed by the city council by way of a motion. The ordinance does provide that there's a section that says confirmation by the council. It says following any proclamation or declaration of a state of emergency by the mayor, he or she shall within 24 hours have same confirmed by the council, just so we don't know when we're going to be meeting next. So I would make that recommendation that your proclamation of a citywide emergency just be confirmed by the city council.
Okay, thank you. So let's go back to the state of emergency, what I just read, and get a motion and support.
Madam Mayor, I'll motion to support your proclamation of state of emergency.
Support.
Moved and supported. Please call the roll, Mr. Fairbrother.
Councilperson Lucido?
Yes.
Councilperson Baker?
Yes.
Councilperson DeMonico?
Yes.
Councilperson Curley?
Yes.
Mayor Owens?
Yes, thank you. We never had to do a state of emergency, so that's something new for us. Hope we don't have to do it again. Next is a motion to cancel.
Mayor?
City manager has a question.
Okay, see everybody.
See you.
We were just having this little mini chat back here as Rich was speaking.
I think I have a better understanding of what you were asking.
Okay.
As we're reading news across the country, we're aware that different states have different rules and regulations. And we in Michigan don't have the authority at this point, we as a city,
Okay.
to limit gun sales or to set hours of, operation for businesses, whether more or less. But I understand from Randy, who just kind of shared this with me, there are some other states that have the ability to do that based upon the laws that they have.
Okay.
But we don't have that at this point. All we can do is be very careful, inform our residents, share as much as we can. And the majority of the rules that we have coming down are coming from the governor's office. And we're following the governor's lead on, what has to be closed and what can be open and how. For instance, all the drive-through restaurants are open. You cannot sit down in their restaurants. That's the governor's order. So I hope that helps just a little bit more. We realize that when we read, there's different states that have different laws and give themselves, the states may give themselves different powers, or their governors may have different powers than we do.
Right.
But we can only follow what's legal for us to do. And it is a concern because, we're reading about what other people are doing in Florida or Illinois or New York. And we just have to follow the laws we're bound by in this state. So we're a little bit limited on things we might like to do. We just simply don't have the powers to do them.
Okay.
So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. 'Cause,
Okay.
not only did I research what we're doing in Michigan, but just looking at what other people are doing
Right.
and seeing, do we have that same capability? And you saying some of it we do and some of it we don't. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And so the motion, now we said the motion to cancel April 7th is due to the virus, correct? That's why you,
Yeah, that's why I was suggesting it. Schools canceled until just 2 days before that, so I'm assuming schools are it's probably going to be extended after seeing everything going on.
I just didn't want to, my opinion was canceling the event is everybody's still working. I don't know why we can't still do a council meeting and do business as usual. I got off the phone today with the executive of Macomb County and the Macomb County Health Department and all those people, and they said we're still doing business as usual. We're not shutting anything down, so I don't know why we are doing that. And we still got decisions we have to make and things like that, so, I mean, not saying that's not a bad idea, I'm just giving you.
Yeah,
But I
just
think-
generally, I guess from my point of view, just anything where we need to all be near each other, and if we're inviting the public out just as a public health reason, that'd be all. I think we're mainly, because of it, tabling a lot of items on the agenda anyway, so we probably wouldn't be bringing them up on the April 7th meeting either. And that's why I just want to make sure we're still paying payroll and we're doing these, waiving late fees on water bills and that sort of thing. I think this is, like you said, something none of us have seen before, so.
Yeah, so I'm not, I'm not saying I don't agree that we should, but at the same time, my input in it is, like, we talked all on the phone, the mayors and all the things like that. We talked about some of the case, we don't know all the cases that are happening, so it might increase. So while we are at a place where it's not that many people, I would like to still do business as usual too. We have to shut down. I don't want to shut down and we don't know what's going on yet and we're still learning and cases are still, I would like to shut down when it is completely needed. But you guys have any say so on?
Well, in my opinion, I do think that I agree with both of you. I agree with Mayor Owens. I do think we definitely still need to be meeting. I don't know if we need to be meeting every, twice a month. I think we might be able to get our agendas, because I would ask, in part of this motion, that city management only puts pressing matters on our agendas to begin with. Anything that can wait until this virus passes, to postpone those items so our agendas are shorter. But at that time, I think because of that, we can meet once a month and get through all of our items, which is giving everyone less exposure if we're only coming out once a month instead of twice a month.
If I could ask Mr. Albright just a inquiry. If, say we do not cancel the meeting, but then schools canceled, through that time and all that, and we thought it was a good idea to cancel. How do we even go about canceling a regular city council meeting?
Well, you could make as part of the motion that the meeting is to continue unless there is some further directive from the governor. You could do it that way.
I like that way.
That would be one suggestion. Or you could just simply cancel the April 7th meeting and just set it later in the month. So there are different options that are available to the council, or just forego the meeting altogether.
Well, so say then it goes even further, we only cancel the 7th, and it seems like we need to cancel the 21st. How would we, can we cancel a meeting? Just, like, how do we, I guess,
Well, you could simply appear for that particular scheduled meeting date, and in light of whatever developments have come about, simply appear here, make a motion to table the meeting, and that way it's cut really short, and you have a meeting that's all of 2 minutes.
Okay.
We don't have.
I'm sorry, Mr.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
We don't have a system where all the council can still do a meeting, because I know when I was out of town, not too long ago, and I did the Skype. We could not do like a Skype if Mr. DeMonico was thinking about canceling, instead of canceling, still do business as usual. Do we have that set up, or?
Well, I know that the City of Sterling Heights this evening is going to be having their meeting, and all of the council members are going to be appearing by teleconference.
Okay.
And the various city officials are also going to be appearing by teleconference. So anybody that would be watching the council meeting from home through a cable access channel will simply see a screen with pictures of the various council members, and each of them will talk separately. I did speak with Mayor Taylor yesterday. I happened to see him in probate court, and I asked him how they were going to be handling this, and that's how he said they were going to be doing things. And I did read in the Macomb Daily that that's also how they were planning on conducting their meeting this evening. And I know that as far as audience participation, that is going to be, for the most part, suspended as it normally would be conducted. However, they were requesting that anybody who wanted to make a statement during the hearing of the public would simply email their question or their concerns, their inquiries, and then those emails would then be read during the course of the audience participation during the meeting. So that's one way that the City of Sterling Heights was going to be handling those. And I believe Shelby Township was going to be going to teleconferencing as well.
Okay, thank you.
So that is something that the council could do for the next meeting, is conduct the meeting via teleconference.
Okay, sounds good to me. So we got a couple options.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like, man, I see both sides of it as well. I think if we can keep the meetings condensed to vital things, vital decisions, and then if something is done or said by the governor where we need to cancel a meeting, like Mr. Albright said, we can appear and just say, hey, we're gonna postpone a meeting, or that way everything is legit. And because it's almost like we're just waiting to see what happens and which way we can go. And I just think that if we don't already have it set up or planned to do a meeting such as the teleconference ahead of time, we don't know if we'll need to do that. So if there's a thing where things are getting worse and it's a health concern, I think meeting and appearing and then just postponing the meeting or making it a 2-minute meeting, like he said, or if there's some vital things we can decide upon, maybe we can do that quickly and then, try to keep everybody healthy and safe. Because that's the ultimate concern that everybody has. So I think the option of either counseling or appearing and then counseling if necessary, I would lean towards that option, just like he suggested. But
yeah,
that's
I agree. I think we should keep the council meeting going until further directed by the governor, or from the governor, and letting us know if we should or shouldn't do something. But I think we should keep business as usual. I mean, it's not that many people but Mr. Creech who showed up, so.
Madam Mayor?
And some of the council who don't want to show up can do a teleconference if need be. Yes, sir.
Teleconference, oh boy. That's like 23rd century, isn't it? I can't even operate my cell phone. I guess as long as this crisis with this, I guess I would not have a problem meeting once a month. There are things on the agenda that doesn't have to be dealt with that, like tonight. If there are certain things on there that we could control, we can control the agenda where things need to be dealt with if we are meeting once a month. But, that's just my opinion. Once a month is all right with me, but if you want to go teleconference, you just come on over to my house and help me figure it out.
I don't think, because we already meet twice a month, that's not a lot. So
No, it's not.
not a lot, so to minimize it to one time, and nobody's even here, and then we decrease some of the things that's on here. I think everything that's on here might be, all of it is important. Some might be more important than others. But I think having the hearing of the public not be as much people here, that has a lot to do with us being able to get through this meeting a lot faster.
Mr. Alpert, I have a question. If we decide to still meet, is there any way we could offer up a live stream and ask and not allow the public in? I guess that's my question.
Well, that's a gray area that is becoming a reality for a lot of municipalities as they grapple with this crisis that everyone's experiencing. So would that necessarily be a violation of the Open Meetings Act? It's hard to say. I think what's important is that the members of the public have an opportunity to see city business being conducted, whether that's through a teleconference where members of the public can hear the council members conducting city business. And I think as long as they are given an opportunity to express their concerns, for instance, by sending perhaps an email to a designated person at City Hall, and then that person reading those concerns, they're not available in person, but they're still getting their opinions and their viewpoints across.
Yeah, that's my biggest concern, is you're right, Madam Mayor. There is only one person in the audience this evening, but if we're still having meetings, 50 people could show up. We either have to allow no one or everyone in, and right now, we're not allowed to have more than 450 people in the room. Luckily, we didn't have that as an issue tonight. We only have 11 here. But that's my concern.
But according to the governor, you only can let a certain amount of people in, so that we're going by what she's saying. We can't have 50 people in here if the governor said we can't.
That's according to the governor.
Exactly. So
right, but that's what I'm saying, because then where do who do we allow in and who we don't? That's my thing. Just because we only have one here tonight, if we have another meeting, only way I would be comfortable with having another meeting, I guess on April 7th, is either do a teleconference or somehow live streaming it, having no public here, and then offering them the ability to email us our questions and then have them answered at the end of the meeting or something along the lines of that, so they can still participate, but where no one can come, so we don't have that issue of a bunch of people being here. I'm not of a compromise because I'm in the situation that I am in. I'm a fairly healthy adult, but I do have a son at home that is compromised, and if I get it, he's gonna get it. So I have to, at the same time, protect myself and my family. So that's where I'm coming from with that.
Yeah, I have 2 daughters too, and so does Mr. Baker. So I think we all are concerned about our children, even being here today. But we can't let the virus control us. We still have a city to run, and people still.
Madam Mayor, if I may ask, so Rich, with this teleconference, you're talking about a teleconference for one of the council meetings and use a teleconference to have a council meeting? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, a teleconference would be used to conduct an actual city council meeting.
And
the
that
meeting would begin.
we can bypass the Opens Meeting Act with that?
That's what's being done tonight in Sterling Heights.
The what?
That's what's being done tonight in Sterling Heights. And I know that the Open Meetings Act does allow for members to appear via teleconference. Now, we have a situation where this would be the entire body appearing by teleconference. Other than tonight in Sterling Heights, I believe that may be the first time that's ever happened in the state of Michigan, where you have the entire council appearing from separate areas, all appearing for one meeting via teleconference.
So our whole discussion for the last half hour is, should we have 2 meetings a month or 1 meeting a month until this crisis is over? Is that, am I right about that? That's what our discussion's been?
It's part of it, exploring options.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But we all know things are going to get a lot worse with this virus, a lot worse. And if you don't think that, then so maybe it would be safer during this crisis to have 1 meeting a month and then go back to 2 meetings. It's not unusual. Other council meetings within the United States meet only once a month. So it's not something that we're inventing. It's something that we're thinking about because of the crisis. It's not something that because we got something to do that third or first Tuesday night and we don't want to come to a meeting. I think the concern for the council people who are suggesting it is that we want to be careful of exposures. And you're right, there could have been 50 people here tonight. You know, it's
also possible the council needs a quorum in order to conduct business, which in this case would be 3. So it always could be a situation too where maybe 1 or 2 members of council appeared via teleconference, and the other members, if they were comfortable, appeared in person here at the council in the council chambers.
Well, I'll make a motion, see where it goes then. I just would motion just to err on the side of caution that we cancel April 7 and just have April 21st as our next council meeting.
no on the 7th and yes on the 24th? Is that what you're saying?
21st.
Correct.
Okay.
I'll support that.
Motion is supported, please call the roll.
Councilperson DeMonico,
Yes.
Councilperson Lucido,
Yes.
Councilperson Curley,
Yes.
Mayor Owens.
The reason I'm saying yes is because if people don't feel comfortable being here at work, then I have to respect that. So yes,
Councilperson Baker.
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you, members of City Council. April 7th happens to be my birthday too.
Well, happy birthday to you.
Happy
That was-
birthday. Okay, next is paying the bills. I think Mr. DeMonico put this.
Yeah,
added this.
just, I guess my suggestion about payroll and bills was, especially since we're not going to have the April 7th meeting,
Okay.
that we give essentially authority for the city manager and finance director to continue with payroll and bills, so the city employees and vendors are continuing to get paid, but we still receive all the payroll and bills as usual, like in our packets or an email. And of course, if you have a question, you can talk to the city manager, finance director, but just so everyone at the city knows they're going to get paid and all our vendors know we get paid, just some sort of motion to that effect.
You want to make it?
All right, I'll motion that the city manager and finance director, as long as the coronavirus is an issue, indefinitely can make payroll and bills without the council vote at each meeting.
Support.
Moved and supported, please call the roll.
Councilperson DeMonico,
Yes.
Councilperson Baker,
Yes.
Councilperson Curley,
Yes.
Mayor Owens,
Yes.
Councilperson Lucido.
Yes.
Next is Councilman DeMonico wants to speak on the city manager having some employees who can work from home.
Yeah, that's
Mr.
really all.
DeMonico.
I did talk with the city manager briefly, and there might not be a huge amount or possibly anybody depending, because of our current technology situation and just because of how, obviously like police, fire, DPW
Yeah.
aren't jobs you can work from home. Just a motion to support the city manager if she did find anybody that can work from home, just require them to work from home to try and prevent the spread of the virus. So that'd be my motion.
I'll support.
Moved and supported, call the roll.
Councilperson DeMonico?
Yes.
Councilperson Lucido?
Yes.
Mayor Owens?
Yes.
Councilperson Baker?
Yes.
Councilperson Curley.
Yes.
Next is the legal actions on nuisance abatement. This was brought to us by Councilman DeMonico. Mr. DeMonico?
And essentially the same thing, I guess, just for the attorney, and he brought him up earlier that show causes and dangerous building hearings were already delayed, but I guess I'd just suggest we just support that, so I just motion that we delay any nuisance abatements, dangerous building hearings, show cause hearings, essentially until further notice.
Support.
Moved and supported, call the roll.
Councilperson DeMonico?
Yes.
Councilperson Baker?
Yes.
Councilperson Lucido?
Yes.
Councilperson Curley.
Yes.
Mayor Owens.
Yes. Next, we have payroll and bills. Was that, before I go on that, was that it, Mr. Councilman DeMonico?
I have them all checked off, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for bringing some of these things.
When do you want a motion for payroll and bills?
Yes, once I call it, I want to make sure that was all, everything? Okay.
I think that
All
was
right, go
everything.
ahead.
Yeah.
No.
I would move for the payment of bills an amount of $2,607,556.45.
Support.
Moved and supported. We almost done. Please call the roll.
Councilperson Curley.
Yes.
Councilperson Lucido.
Yes.
Councilperson DeMonico.
Yes.
Mayor Owens.
Yes.
Councilperson Baker.
Yes.
Next is the hearing of the public. The second part of the hearing of the public is open.
You don't have to. You're looking at us like we're making you.
You know, excuse me, Harvey Creech, resident of East Detroit. I'm glad you just said that, because, you know, it's at the point, maybe the residents, if you don't want to hear us, maybe we shouldn't come here anyways. Because that's what I'm just getting ready to say. If you're not going to have the meetings, it's not going to make a difference. And even that, as I said, you know, it's not the 3 minutes of fame, the 3 minutes of glory, the 3 minutes of anything. If a person steps up here to this mic, they have something to say to the city. And I said the same difference right now. We have we're supposed to have a dual recreation committee. Are we going to use it? What is going to happen to our right now? We're talking about the next 2 months. And I'm going to say something to the effect, and I don't care if anybody cares about it. Because last time we said this, don't worry about it, Mr. Creech, we have all the time in the world. Now we have no time. Man, what we're going to handle before, I see a few people shaking their head. Yeah, we got all the time in the world. Tomorrow we might not even be here. People, this is the reality check I think that we all needed. But it's time to take care of this stuff. You know, when you have a table and you have your plate set, and the same difference, if you don't have a fork, spoon, or a knife, you have to eat with your hands. You have to have all the components. When you've got the components, work with them. Because it just happened right now, as I said before, too. Harvey, you just come up with the idea and the rest of the stuff, too. Now we're only going to have one meeting a month. Now when you come here, the same difference. This resident has 3 minutes to talk here, 3 minutes to talk here. It doesn't matter. What's the use of them showing up if you're not going to listen? And there again, too, Carter, we have a lot of fun. and I do like you. And as I said, the same, I can go all the way across the board. We've had our disagreements and our agreements. People, we have to start working together. Because we're not. I'm telling you, this city has got to go forward. It can't go backwards anymore. This city now has got to go forward. When we've got time to do something, when the job has to be done, let's get it done. Because we can't, every time we wait, a typical example, this gentleman right here, Randy, he tells you, when we wait to get a street fixed, what does it cost the next time around? You can't wait. When it's time to get something done, the same as our parks, our recreation, everything we need to get done, let's start getting some of it done. Now you've got some time. Now you've got some time to talk.
30 seconds, sir.
Okay, thank you. But now you've got some time to do this. There's nobody going to be in your way. There's nobody going to be telling you what to do. Just let the people know what's going on. That's all I've ever tried to do. Please, let me know what's going on, the rest of the stuff. There's no use me coming to talk to you if there's no direction to go in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Creech. Okay, the second part of the hearing of the public is closed. Mayor and council report, starting with Councilman Curley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple quick things, and just to let everybody know, because of my age at 83 and because of the doctor's suggestion, at 9 o'clock I will start a 14-day self-quarantine. And I would suggest that anybody's watching and listening that's the same age ought to think seriously about doing that, because it's not the 18 and 19-year-olds that are having problems, because you can see them at the beach, and there's thousands of them at the beach, so it's not affecting them. It's affecting people at my age. And I want to end with something positive. It's a story. It's a true story, but I'm going to use, there was a young boy by the name of Paul, and Paul got leukemia when he was just a little tiny boy, 1 or 2 years old. And it went into remission, and he became a fan of the Marines. He loved the Marines. Every time had a chance to see the Marines, he would go to it. But the leukemia came back when he was 9 years old. And the Marines found out about how much Paul loved the Marines, that they made him an honorary Marine and gave him things at the hospital. And the day that the Marine knew that he was dying, one of the Marines went to the hospital and stood at attention for 8 hours. Now that's a positive story. And I just want to leave everybody that's leaving here tonight with something positive in your mind and not something negative. So thank you and God bless.
Thank you, sir. Councilman DeMonico.
Thanks, Mayor. Well, on that note, happy St. Patrick's Day. Guess I'll start on a positive note.
Is that today?
Yes. And just, yeah, everyone take coronavirus seriously, please, everybody. We do have 8 cases last I saw in Macomb County, so it is nearby now. You know, just take social distancing measures as we are right now. We're all, it's close, it's 6 feet, I would say. And we've got everyone else spread out throughout the council chambers. Try to do this as safely as possible. Make sure we're doing our duty, doing our legal duty also, trying to do the best balance we can. And of course, we canceled the next meeting, so just trying to do what we can. Obviously, just 7 days ago, we were all voting, so and the polls were open, so it's been a drastic change just in 7 days. So everyone try to social distance as much as possible and do what you can to help prevent the spread. And I keep posting things. I've got a website, cardydemonico.com. You can do that, /coronavirus or COVID-19. Either one will work. And I've posted a bunch of links and just things like for the Eastpointe Community Schools, food distribution, and South Lake if you're in South Lake's district, and just a bunch of other helpful things that are for local. And then, Ms. Doom, I had one question for you. Did anyone turn anything in to be read aloud for the meeting? No, they didn't. Okay, nobody turned anything in. All right. Thank you, Ms. Doom. That was it.
Thank you, Mr. DeMonico and Mr. Curley. Councilman Baker.
Well, I first want to say that I hope everybody is well during this time. Anybody that's dealing with it to whatever capacity, I just hope that anyone, that person or persons can get the help that they need. Encourage everybody to be safe. In keeping with the positive, thank Councilman DeMonico for his virtual coffee hour. I couldn't drink coffee then, but I do appreciate just the information that he was giving out, trying to keep everybody up to date on what's going on and encouraging everybody to be safe. And then, as in my usual fashion, my word of the day, this would be more of a phrase of the day. And the term is plebeian sobriquet. And that's something that I heard on TV. I didn't make that up. But the term plebeian has multiple definitions, but one definition is just it's something common amongst a group of people. Sobriquet is a nickname. So you put them together, you got a common nickname. So it's very common that in groups that we interact with on a regular basis, we tend to take on or we'll sometimes get a name by the people that we interact with. When I was growing up, I played a lot of sports, in the neighborhoods. I had nicknames just then. So like fast forwarding now, as we interact in our communities with one another, what characteristics are we displaying? What do people see in us? What name do we want to be remembered by? So that's it.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
First, I would like to thank everyone that's watching tonight. And even though we're not having a council meeting on April 7th, and we're not going to be meeting back until the 21st, I want to let everyone know I am always available via telephone, via email. Check my email multiple times a day. I encourage residents, any questions, concerns, anything, please reach out to me. I will try to get back to you with your answers as soon as possible. I've still been in communication with city administration and with the mayor. And I would like to take a moment to thank city administration and the mayor for keeping everything moving forward. And I think everything's been going really smooth, and I do appreciate that. We haven't really had any complaints, which I always like to hear, so that's good. And I'd like to wish everyone a happy St. Patrick's Day, and that's all I have this evening.
Thank you. I would like to thank everybody who's watching at home for continuously making what we do here as important. Even if you can't show up, it's still important for you to see what's going on and get updates. We are constantly receiving updates by our city manager and our administrations, as well as like I said earlier, I was on the phone with the executive and also the director of the health department. I actually spoke to him last week about things that's going on. So I've been on each and every person every other day to keep me updated, and whatever I know, I'll let Ms. Doom know if she doesn't know already, and she lets me know if I don't know already. So we're always constantly updating our website and things like that. Want to say thanks to Councilman DeMonico for his website. My job is to make sure that the residents are well and making sure that everything is notified by a location where everybody knows about, and that is the Eastpointe website. And because we have current, accurate news, and also our Facebook page, because a lot of stuff on Facebook and things like that can be misconstrued and not be the truth. So you want to get the accurate information from your elected officials who have spoken to the people who are updating you on what's going on, because you can have a lot of people that have hoax and things like that. And so saying that, I have always talked to the Macomb County Health Department, and they allow us to know what's going on. You won't know everybody's case because you have to understand it's a HIPAA law. So if somebody says something, or why the mayor isn't doing anything, or why a council person didn't do anything, or the city manager, these are laws set in place. We have to respect people's privacy. And so saying that, if it's a need-to-know basis, they will let us know, and trust us, we will let you know, because that's our job. It's levels and it's chain of commands of what we know and who to send that information out to. And as mayor, I have to respect people who get sick, and if they sick, if they want that known, they will tell the right people, and they will tell us. So we want to respect people's privacy. We want to respect those who have tested positive and continuously pray for them. And I have a number, so if you want to know more, or you've been exposed, or you think you've been exposed, you want to call this helpline that the director of public safety, not public safety, of the health department of Macomb gave me to give to you all. Is 586-463-3750. Again, that is 586-463-3750. So if you think you have been in contact with anything, or you think you want to get more information, you will call this number. And if we know anything, we will let you know by our website, or you can call this number. But do not think everything you see on Facebook or everything you hear. We have people who are studying these things, are scientists, who are professionals that know what they're talking about. And when they know what they're talking about, they will send it to the city manager, and the city manager will let me know, and we will let the residents know. So that being said, you all be safe and continuously pray. And Mr. Creech, you were right. You were absolutely right. It's sad that this whole incident has to make us become closer together. But God knows exactly what he's doing. So saying that, I want a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. Please call the roll.
Councilperson Curley,
Yes.
Councilperson DeMonico,
Yes.
Councilperson Lucido,
Yes.
Mayor Owens,
Yes.
Councilperson Baker.
Yes.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.